Thank you for being here. I'm glad to be with you. I'm really glad to be in Oregon for a specific reason. I don't know if you realize the position you are in right now. I made an extra effort to make sure I was here now, and they're already scheduling my return visit because some really interesting things are coming together in your state that puts you in a place where you could change the whole country. And so there are a bunch of teams. We have a bunch of teams in a bunch of counties. And if you want to get involved, please talk to Janice if you're in Multnomah, right? Or who's the person in charge in Clackamas I should send them to?
Teresa Hamilton.
Teresa Hamilton. Where are you, Teresa? She's purple shirt back there if you want to get involved. I've already been meeting with the local teams. We're planning the strategy we're doing. And I would only modify one thing on the security, Steve, wherever you went. I would say if the bad guys are coming that way, all of you without guns go that way. And all of you with guns go that way, okay? I'm a firm believer that we are responsible to defend ourselves. The Second Amendment isn't our right to keep and bear arms. It's our duty to be armed and proficient. And I really think that we get a lot of these constitutional ideas upside down. We think, well, those are our constitutional rights, and then we expect somebody else to defend them. No, there are God-given natural rights, and we're supposed to defend them, okay? They're just enumerated in the Constitution. Anyway, so that's a whole nother topic. Bring me back if we want to hear a lecture on the Constitution. All right. But anyway, I'm glad to be with you, and hopefully you'll understand after I've explained where I'm coming from and what I'm doing, how you're going to play into this. It's a very important thing. I'm not exaggerating. And the teams I've been working with, I had a team this afternoon I worked with. They're on fire. They are one of the more advanced teams in your state in terms of the work we're doing. Last night I met with a team from Clackamas, and they're well underway. I wouldn't say they're ahead, but they're well underway. They're making good progress. So anyway, I'm glad to be with you. Now, on my calendar, my scheduler always gives me a clue. She says, there's clues for different kinds of presentations I give. And she said, tonight's going to be a red pill presentation. And what that means is my job is to wake you up. And it's from the movie Matrix. If you take the red pill, you wake up and you realize what the world really is. If you take the blue pill, you go back to your la la land and everything's peachy keen, right? That's the way the movie describes. So just kind of let me see if she was right. How many of you have heard me before in person? Raise your hand. Well, that's 2/3. So, okay, I got to wake you up a little bit still, but not as much maybe. Maybe a lot of you are already on board. Like, for example, I'm going to tell you that Trump didn't win the 2024 election. What? What? When I'm done, you're going to believe me. When I show you the data, you're going to say, oh my goodness, we're in trouble, Dr. Frank. Yes. We're in big trouble. So anyway, I'm gonna take you down that road. And I heard you, Janice. You just keep your mouth quiet. Okay. Now, I testified before your county commissioners last time I was in town, remember? And I got my 5 minutes instead of 10 minutes that they'd promised us. So I condensed it. But basically, I told them, something's coming down the pike and you better be prepared because here it's coming, right? And we're closer now than we were then. And they're not going to listen to me. But the nice thing is we've made it public now. We're coming for you. You better be ready. And I've also done a debate in Coos County. It was really fun. It was a 3.5 hour long public debate. Wow. When I testified here in Washington County, not Clackamas, in Washington County in the Tim Sipple case, thank you, Steve Jonkus, who was the attorney there, I sat in the witness stand and the prosecution objected. They said, this guy, he's not an expert. He doesn't get to give expert testimony. And they had like a little mini trial within the big trial to decide whether or not I could testify. And they brought out this guy, Justin Grimmer, from Stanford. He said, yeah, Dr. Frank, yeah, he's a world famous scientist. He can comment on science. Yeah, he's good at math. He can talk about math, but he's not an expert at elections. And I just wish I could have cross-examined him. Because I would have said, well, how many secretaries of states have you reviewed elections with? 0. Me? About 25. How many attorneys generals have you met with and hacked into their elections and showed them how vulnerable their elections are? Him? 0. Me? About 25. How many legislatures have you testified to at their request, analyzing their elections for them? How many of you? None. How many of me? About a dozen, okay? So I don't know. I think I'm an expert at elections, and I maybe more than him. So it was funny during the debate. You can watch this. I put it up on my YouTube channel. During the debate, he kept saying, Dr. Frank claims that he can predict the elections in the state, but he can't do that. And he gave all these reasons. And so I just showed my predictions one after another. And he's like, well, you can't do that. It doesn't work. And I'm like, here it is. It's just one after another. I mean, it's just, I could show you that I can predict it. So it was fun. I just mopped the floor with him. But anyway, if that's my opinion, but you're welcome to see it. So I've been, Marty up there in Coos County did a video, The Curious Case of Coos County. I'm featured in that. But I've been coming around Oregon. I've got a lot of stuff up there about Oregon. So I'm not new. I guess I'm just letting you know I'm not new to Oregon, okay? I'm actually not new to this part of the country. I was conceived in Shasta County. My parents were students at Shasta College. And my mother was the chemistry prize winner. And that's where I get my science, I think. And my father was the class president, and I think that's where I get my leadership stuff, right? So I'm not an accident. The acorn doesn't fall far from the tree. He has a funny first name. It's Gawana, and people are like, what's Gawana? Well, it's a Cherokee name, and I have Cherokee blood. I have a lot more than she does. It means big black horse. It's my middle name. And it's hard to say, so just call me Stud. Okay. So I grew up after that, and so I actually have relatives in Roseburg and in Hood. So I used to come up here all the summers, all the time. So I'm very familiar with Oregon. I love it here. I grew up on an Angus ranch, though, in Sonoma County. So I actually know things and can do things. You know, farmers can do things. It's amazing. I can tell you stories, but I just wanted to kind of connect you to one thing. So one day I was driving the hay truck when I was 14, when we were allowed to drive the heavy equipment when we were young. And I was driving past the library, and they were closing down the library because we built a new one on the other side of town. They put all the old books out that nobody ever checked out, because why bring the old books nobody checks out to the new library? And they were all out on tables, and the Feynman lectures on physics were out there, and they were 10 cents a piece. So I bought them. They're worth about $1,500 today, those 3 books. But I read them the summer of my 8th grade year. I've been a physicist ever since. That's just an amazing thing, but I'm also a musician. I went to school in Santa Barbara, University of California, Santa Barbara after Westmont. I went to Westmont first, so I'm a musician. So you have to use all the talents God gives you. Got my PhD at UCSB and then moved out to Ohio. So that's where I live now with my 3 beautiful children and my wife of 43 years. This all comes together. I'm not just introducing myself. You're going to see how this all goes together. I went to Ohio because the governor was setting up what they call centers of excellence. And I got to be a young professor, and the state gave me $1 million to build my own lab, which was awesome. And I did research, and I made a big scientific discovery. I got nominated for a Nobel Prize in chemistry, and for about 2 years, I was flying around the world describing my discoveries. So it was pretty cool. As a young scientist, featured on the cover of the leading journals in the world. It kind of launched my popularity, and people who knew who I was, my credibility. So that was a big deal. I have 60 peer-reviewed publications. So I'm a real scientist. Okay, I'm a real scientist, and I usually just kind of skim over that stuff. My handlers always say, you got to tell people who you are. They need to know that you really know what you're talking about. So I have to do that. Anyway, I live out near a little town called Springfield, which you all heard of, because of the debates with Kamala and Trump. Remember, and it was a big problem in our town because we were being overrun by the neighboring. The neighboring exodus. But all that problem is now resolved because Trump is on the job. So we're in good shape. Okay. So the way to think about me and what I'm going to be showing you tonight, and you'll understand more the more I show you, I'm a modeler. I love huge data sets. If you give me a set of data, it's like raw data to me. In fact, I spent the whole first half of today digging through Clackamas, and I finished. I'm going to be giving you that spreadsheet. Digging through your roles, and I've got put together a tool that you're going to be able to use to find all kinds of fraud in your election. So I'm not just a modeler. After I model something, then I make predictions with it, and then I try to make it into a simple way of explaining so that people who aren't as proficient at computers and whatnot can use. And so somebody said to me, you need a new motto, Dr. Frank. You need to have I have a graph for that, should be my motto, because I do. I graph everything. I've been tracking population and demographics since the 80s, 1980s. And if I hadn't been done that, I don't think I would have discovered what I've discovered in the elections, because it's all connected, and I hadn't realized that. How long are people going to live? I can tell you how long you're going to live on average based, and what I did is I modeled all the demographics, and I gave you a simple graph. Like, I'm 64 years old, and so that means I got about a 1.5% chance of passing away this year. Looks like I got about 18 more years to live on average, which means I'm going to live till I'm about 81 on average. Okay? I want to be more than average, but that's on average, you know. My dad's 85, so this year he's probably got about a 7% chance of passing away, and he's probably going to live till he's 91. So I know I got to get out there fishing with him because I got 6 more years on average. Right? So I just made it easy for people to kind of know. You see, it's fun. I like doing that stuff. While I was catching up on my population analysis in December, I ran into something really interesting I hadn't noticed. That since Roe v. Wade, abortions, that's this black curve here, have suddenly surged. I didn't expect that. You would think that when Roe v. Wade was overturned, it might go the other way, but it's actually the opposite. The statistics show that our abortion's been surging in our country so much. What made me look into it is our population, this top curve, is suddenly dropping dramatically in our country. And people were saying that was due to COVID, but it's not. It's due to the abortion, which is shocking. And just to kind of reduce that to a simple explanation, I'm doing this on purpose so you can see how I think and what my pattern is. I take a lot of data, I study it, I discover things, and then I come up with a simple way to talk about it. Follow me? So with abortion, for every 5 pregnancies in America, 1 ends in an abortion. For every 5, 1 ends in an abortion. For every 3 households in America, 2 of them would have 1 more family member, except for the legal abortion in America. That's how much we've had. And when I tell people, they're like shocked. Why? Because people aren't used to thinking about the numbers, and it kind of gets lost in the noise. So I just gave you very easy numbers to remember. 1 in 5 pregnancies, 2 out of 3 households would have another member in their family except for that. Now something that's complicated is like in the environment. And so when I was in college, my second year in college, the president of Greenpeace came and said, we need to burn all the coal we can burn because we need to make lots of CO2 to put in the atmosphere to capture the heat so that we can keep the coming ice age from destroying us. So that's an interesting claim. So I went to my dorm room and I did some calculations that evening, and I calculated that we'd have to burn half of the world's known coal to produce enough CO2 to warm the environment 1 degree centigrade. And that would only last 1 year, and you guys know that up here in Oregon because the trees eat it. The trees love it, they scarf it up. And so then the next year, you'd have to burn the other half of the world's known coal to keep that 1 degree warmer. And then we'd all be all out of coal, okay? That's a pretty stupid plan right before an ice age to have used up all our coal, wouldn't you think? Okay. So, in other words, the way I think is when I hear a claim, I go get the data, I do the calculations, and then I make a decision, not based upon what the media says, what the politicians say, what the numbers say. That's a pretty stupid idea to burn all your coal right before an ice age, right? Yeah, you see where I'm going? That's how I think. Now, I updated my graphs on this because I had a lull after the election of traveling, and we've been putting satellites up in space since about 1979, and you can look at the temperature, the average temperature of the Earth. I've been tracking that ever since the Greenpeace thing. And so I put my graph, this blue curve is the average temperature of the whole Earth over that period of time since 1979. And I just put this really simple red curve on top of it so you can see the trend, the warming trend on the planet. So I did this in November. And I said, don't worry, everybody. What you're going to hear in the media is that, oh no, we're having was record temperatures. I said, don't worry, by March we'll be down to here. That's what I said. I said, but in the meantime, I said, I will have a longer discussion. You can look at it on my new YouTube channel. In the meantime, you're going to hear all kinds of hot air about how our planet is, going through a disaster. And guess where we are, right? Where I said we'd be, okay? And this is as of last month, or February. And I just checked it today. It's right in there somewhere. So anyway, I model sunspots. I model everything. I just can't help myself. So it's like we're driving across Montana, and with my dad, he's a fly fisherman, and these geese are flying over, and my dad says, son, look at the geese, they're beautiful. And he goes, do you know why they fly in a V? I'm like, Dad, of course I know why they fly in a V. It's like, I'm a physicist. I know Bernoulli's equation. I'm doing all this stuff. He goes, yeah. He says, but do you know why one side is longer than the other? I'm like going through all the equations and thinking, I don't know, Dad. He says, because one side has more geese in it. Sometimes the answer is that simple. Sometimes the answer is that simple. And I'm going to show you some things today that are so obvious and so simple, but they've disguised it from you in all kinds of ways. So I'm having a little fun with you with some jokes, but I'm also showing you the way I think and how I want you to start thinking. If you want to catch up on a lot of that stuff, you can go to my YouTube channel or my Facebook page. I'll put that up again later. And since I'm in church, a lot of times I come and give whole sermons on science and faith. I'm a real scientist, but I'm also a real Christian, and it's a lot of fun to talk about. That's not for tonight, though. So what happened was, how did I get into elections? So in 2020, I was modeling COVID-19. It's a first-order differential equation. It's called Farr's law, and also you combine it with some periodic analysis called Fourier transforms. I was predicting all of the deaths in the world. I had 30 countries and every county in America. And I had 150,000 people coming to my websites every week to find out how many people were going to die in their county that week. So it sort of made me famous around the country. And it seems morbid, but it's what I do. I love big data sets, and I didn't want to let the media tell me what to think. I'm looking at the actual data. I mean, I care about my family. I want to know, are we all going to die? What's going to happen? So I was doing all the modeling, and I started a podcast. You asked about podcasts. It was called the Ohio Post-Depressor, because the governor would get up and give a press conference, and everybody would be depressed. And so we did a depressor afterwards, and I would bring in experts from around the country, and it was very popular. 5,000 live views typically twice a week. It made me really famous. We got the health director of Ohio fired, Amy Acton, because she was lying to the public about the numbers, and I exposed that working with a journalist, one of the ones that gets to ask questions at the presser. And so we got him fired, so that also made me famous in Ohio. So people knew I was a numbers guy. By the way, she's running for governor in Ohio. After we exposed the fact that she was lying to the public about the numbers and she had to resign. People have a short political memory. It's shocking. Anyway, I also predicted how many people were going to die. I said there are going to be 1.35 million deaths in America due to COVID, and that's exactly what it worked out to be. I was tracking the excess deaths, et cetera, et cetera. I know I'm a weird person. I've been modeling elections since 1980. I've been modeling epidemics since 1980. You can imagine what 2020 was like for me, elections and epidemics. And I'm also an expert on mRNA technology because I consulted on the manufacture of a lab in Cincinnati, and I had to become an expert at that. So it's like, I'm a weird dude, okay? And I traveled the central part of America for about 10 years teaching everybody about vaccines for Rotary International and vaccines. And that's a whole story I'd want to get. I just want you to realize I'm a numbers guy, and I'm always analyzing everything, and I'm going to do that with you tonight. And I think I'm making my point pretty clear. What got me taken off the internet, so a lot of people lost track of me, is that I put this graph up showing the risk to benefit of getting vaccinated. And I showed, because people were saying, geez, should we get vaccinated, Dr. Frank? And I said, well, let's do a calculation. And what's the risk? What's the benefit? And there was only one time when it made sense for most people to get a vaccine, and there wasn't one at that time yet. So it wasn't worth the risk, and the rest is history. I tried to convince people. I tried to convince people to not do it, but they weren't listening. So anyway, if you want to catch up on me, that's how you can catch up, all right? I think I've given you enough. All right, so then the election happens. Hey, that's enough of the fun stuff. I'm getting serious now. Never. Okay, the election happens, and you remember Doug Mastriano in 2020 asked for an audit of the state of Pennsylvania. It was at the end of November. And this was important. This was really important because President Trump had evidence of fraud in the 2020 election. And what he needed was he needed one state to challenge the certification of the election. And that's why Doug Mastriano asked for it. The next day I got a call from Kathy Barnett. She's from Montgomery County. And she said, would you please come to Montgomery County and help us with our election? Something's wrong. And I said, sure, send me data. Love data. So she sent me some data. I analyzed it. A couple hours later, I called her back and said, wow, look at this, look at this, look at this. So she introduced me to the two legislators, one on the Senate, one in the House, that was doing the audit. And I showed them my work. They put me on the team. This is important because it's the only full forensic audit we had after the 2020 election. All the other audits were very limited and we were not given what we asked for. And this audit, I got to see anything and everything I asked for because I was part of a legislative committee and we had subpoena power. And so I started digging into my data and having a great time. And I don't want to talk about Pennsylvania because I'm trying to bring us up to the present, but I want to just explain one short story from that time because it will help you understand something. So I was studying the voter rolls for Montgomery County. There were about 500,000 people in that county. And I noticed that right before the election, about 6 weeks before the election in 2020, their voter rolls suddenly surged by 50,000. 50,000 out of 500,000. That's about a 10% surge. And I didn't think too much of it because I figured, well, the clerk just turned in the names and people are interested in the election. But I was tracking those names and I noticed that all 50,000 of them voted in the election. So 50,000 were added, all 50,000 voted, and then as I tracked them over the month, by the end of December, they were all removed again from the elections. And that was very interesting to me. So I called Russ Diamond and I said, I need to talk to the Secretary of Bookvar, Secretary of State. That talks about what we were talking about last night, doesn't it? And so I got in touch with the Secretary of State. I said, why are you removing those people from the voter rolls? And she said, because they moved away. And I admit, I was shocked by that. I didn't expect that answer. I hadn't even thought of it, okay? And so I went back, because I know their names and addresses, and I started looking them up, one at a time, and sure enough, they had all moved away 10 years earlier. So what was happening is somebody was using older copies of the voter rolls, reinserting those people back into the rolls, knowing they're not real voters, stuffing ballots using those names, using those registered names. And then after the election, the counties do what they call voter roll maintenance. They were running the National Change of Address Registry and just taking everybody that had moved away a long time ago. So it's like a natural cleanup. So that's interesting. So I went back to Russ Diamond and I said, I want to know who did that. I want to know who put those 50,000 names in there. Give me the logs for the whole state of Pennsylvania for everybody working in the state database. A lot of people don't know this, but your voter database is not controlled by your county. Your voter database is controlled by the state. Your local clerks just log into the database. They don't actually control it. So I said, I want to see the logs for the entire state of Pennsylvania for the last 2 months, everybody who got in the rolls. And so they gave that to me, and then Joncas knows what I'm doing, because we had 4 Supreme Court cases from Montgomery County, and the lawyers wanted us to focus on that, so I was focused on Montgomery County, and we're looking for those 50,000 people. Who put those in there? And we had a team of volunteers. They were scouring the logs, and they found it, and that was the next big surprise for me, which was we discovered that it was the Hillary Clinton campaign that had done that. And it's like, I called Russ Diamond, and I'm like, I don't understand. Why does the Hillary Clinton campaign have access to your voter rolls? First of all, it's 2020. That's history. What's she doing in here now? I don't understand. And why should she have back-end access? She can add and remove anything she wants. And he sent me a newspaper article describing how the state of Pennsylvania had hired the Hillary Clinton campaign to write an app so that you could go on your cell phones and you could register people to vote at college football games and college campuses, and the credentials, the login credentials, were still active. So anybody who had those login credentials could go in and manipulate the state voter rolls just willy-nilly. So that was a big surprise. So I started organizing all my evidence because I'm about to make a presentation. This is about the first week in December now. Presentation to them showing it. We found the source of the fraud and everything. And somebody on the team said, wait a minute, what if there's other groups that have access to the voter rolls? And so we put that on hold and we put the team back to work, and they scoured the entire state for those 2 months leading up to the 2020 election. We found a minimum of 32 non-government organizations were doing the exact same thing. Catholic Relief Services, Lutheran Relief Services, all these NGOs, non-government organizations. By the way, did you notice that when Trump was doing the DOJ stuff, one of the first things he did, he cut off USAID? That's all that money flowing back in through those NGOs back into our elections. That's one of the first things he turned that spigot off. So anyway, that's what we found. So then we started getting all that evidence. We got it all prepared. Now we're about the second week of December, and we presented it to the legislature. And what am I expecting? I'm expecting the legislature to say, oh no, we have to decertify our election. That's what I'm expecting. I left one step out. Sorry. I'm a scientist, so whenever I think I have something figured out, I always do an experiment first, because that's the scientific method. So I thought I had it all figured out what was going on, so I said to my team, give me a list of 1,600 names. Don't tell me how you came up with them. Just 1,600, residences in Montgomery County, and I'm going to run my algorithms on it, because you don't look at 500,000 names one at a time. you write computer programs for that. I said, I'm going to run my algorithms on it, and I'm going to tell you how many people in this county are not real voters who voted in the election with my algorithm. So they picked 1,600 addresses. I predicted 30% of the names they gave me were not real voters in the election. We had 100 volunteers. They knocked on those 1,600 doors for 3 days, and it turned out to be 32% of them. So I was right on the money. So I knew things were going the right way. So then we gave the formal report in closed session to the legislative committee. And I was expecting them to say, oh no, we got to decertify, blah, blah, blah. And Russ Diamond was so excited, he made a YouTube video out of it, 7 minutes long, and posted it on YouTube. Lasted 3 minutes before YouTube took it down. The legislature squelched them and censored him for that. And they didn't want to release anything in public. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, we have limited time here. We're trying to save the country, and we've got the fraud. We got the turkey by the tail here. We're ready to go. But they were saying, no, Dr. Frank, we're going to hold a series of public hearings starting the first Thursday in January. And I'm like, that's kind of late for this, don't you think? We need to get this out there now. And oh no, we're going to be trusted. Dr. Frank, you'll be the first one to testify. Yeah. So I showed up with my bow tie all ready to go. This was my Oregon bow tie. I showed up to testify, and we have technical difficulties today. Sorry, Dr. Frank, we'll have you testify next week. Well, we've preempted you for this other thing we think. By the third week, I figured out, no, they're not going to let me talk. Not going to let me reveal what happened, and you can see what's going on. I was really angry because I was watching our opportunity go away. We were losing our window of opportunity. So I quit talking to them for about a week, and I downloaded all the voter rolls from Florida, because you can do that. They have them online. And I downloaded all the voter rolls from North Carolina and from Ohio and Colorado. And I started running my algorithms on those, and guess what I found? Same stuff happening in those states. And that was a shock to me. And the reason I was doing it is because I was looking for controls. I was trying to find clean elections, because when you have clean elections, you can see the anomalies coming out of the clean elections. And if you learn to do that, you can find fraud quickly. And that's what I couldn't find any clean elections. I flew down to Florida, I met with the Secretary of State, showed him what was going on. He covered it up, showed it DeSantis' team up at the Capitol. They covered it up. I was like, this is the next big surprise for me. Wait a minute, these are Republican states. Their guy lost. Don't they want to fix this? And that shows how naive I was. And I spent most of 2021 traveling the country thinking I could fix the country by meeting with legislators, testifying before investigative boards. And so I can tell you stories for hours. Let me tell you what this is like. I sit in an office with a Secretary of State, and I show them all the evidence, and they're like, well, I don't know how. In order for that to happen, Dr. Frank, you'd have to have access to your machines. I say, yeah. He says, that can't happen because our machines can't go on the internet. That's fun, isn't it, Steve? In the Tim Sipple case, the reason the Tim Sipple case happened is because your Secretary of State and Attorney General filed a restraining order against Tim because they said if that data gets out, then our elections are vulnerable to external hacking because they can be wirelessly accessed. Your own Secretary of State said that. That's not me saying that. But most Secretaries of State don't understand that. So I just pulled out my cell phone with a typical Secretary of State, and I just call my friend, and we start turning on his election machines all over the state and start manipulating their elections right in front of his face. We do that all over the country. I've done this in every state, and you guys are really easy. You're one of the easiest to hack into. Okay, and so you would think that if I did that with them, that they would say, oh no, we got to fix it. So I had to go through my own awakening. I was pretty naive. I was thinking, R's are good and D's are bad, and I had to learn that's not the case. In fact, here in Oregon, you have 105% of your people registered. And people say, well, that's because they're all Democrat. No, Kentucky, very red, they have 105% of their people registered, okay? It's not about Republican versus Democrat. It's about whoever's in control keeping it. And they like having central control of the elections. Government, since when do governments not want to centralize power and control? Since when? So anyway, I think I've covered enough of that Pennsylvania story because you have the same problems here, and I'm about to show you that. But anyway, so what happened then is I was very upset. I remember when the Supreme Court, sounds familiar, Tim? Steve Jonkis, when Montgomery County, we had 4 Supreme Court cases, 2 of them, they were all rejected by the Supreme Court. I was devastated, and it was like late February. I told my wife, the country's gone. We have no recourse. They've stolen our elections, every state, and the courts are impotent to fix it. And the next week, Mr. Lindell called. He had discovered my work because he was friends with Kathy Barnett. She says, you got to meet this guy, Dr. Frank. And he made a movie about me called Scientific Proof. Suddenly, 10 million people knew who I was and knew about a portion of my work. And I started getting calls from all around the country. Dr. Frank, my name is so-and-so. This is my phone number. We have problems in our elections. Would you please come help? Within a week, I had 70 messages on my desk that were almost word for word the same. Please come, Dr. Frank. We got problems with our elections. So I remember thinking, I got to live I got to make a living. So how am I going to do this? So I went up and told my wife, honey, I'm going to put aside my income for 6 months. We're going to save the country, and then I'll be back to work. That was 4.5 years ago, right? Okay. All right. And so she mentioned it earlier. Sandra mentioned I don't charge for any of my work. Ever since I never charge for anything. I don't want anybody to think I'm doing this for money. It's super important that I'm not doing this for money. I didn't charge anything to testify, did I? I think you covered my plane ticket though. Thank you for that. So anyway, that's important. Maybe my hotel too. But anyway. I don't charge because I don't want people to think I'm doing this for money. I'm doing this to fight for my country and the country that made a covenant with God. I want that country back. That's what I'm fighting for. Thank you. I appreciate that. So anyway, I went back to my desk and I looked at the stack of 70 messages and I thought, what am I going to do now? How do I begin? So I prayed, okay, God, whatever you put in front of me, that's what I'm going to do. Okay, took the first message, called Tony Shoup from Pennsylvania, Audit the Vote PA. We started a whole movement there, which is thriving till today. Lots of good stuff happening in Pennsylvania these days. In fact, in Montgomery County, they had one of the cleanest elections in 2024 in the country. And the way we did that is we woke the public up, and we had hundreds and hundreds of people scouring every part of the election, every minute of the election. We hired private investigators to supervise every drop box 24/7. It was like we mobbed the election in Montgomery County. It's one of the cleaner elections in the whole country in 2024. But anyway, I'm off topic. So I called Tony Shoup. Then as soon as I hung up with Tony, my computer went bleep. And okay, God, whatever you put in front of me. So some lady in Washington, so I called her. I said, yeah, hello, this is Doug Frank. I hear all this screaming and yelling coming out of my phone. Sounds like a mass murder. And are you okay? This is Dr. Frank, are you all right? And she says, oh, Dr. Frank, I'm at a woman's prayer meeting at church. We're all in a circle on our knees, and we just prayed and asked God to have Dr. Frank call us. And my life has been like that ever since. It is crazy. I am always in the right place at the right time. You've heard about Tina Peters and that situation in Colorado? I'm the one that did that with her. I'm from the very beginning. It's crazy. I just seem to be in the right place at the right time. And I'm telling you right now, in Oregon, this is the right place at the right time. You guys, yes. When you hear what we got coming, you're going to get it. Anyway, so I think I've told you enough of this stuff. So that's what got me going everywhere. President Trump learned about my work. He asked me to be his keynote speaker for his first rally after being out of office. This was in Wellington, Ohio. So I got to get up, and he said, I want you to explain to the world how they stole my elections. And so that was a big opportunity for me. I was speaking to 21,000 people, and I remember when I walked up to the microphone, I thought to myself, I looked at this crowd of 21,000 people, and they were like drinking beer all day, listening to rock and roll. And I remember thinking, I'm going to try to teach these people math. Because I was using math to show that the elections couldn't be real. But I got to tell you, as soon as I started showing the graphs and big jumbotrons, it's like I could just instantly quiet over the whole audience. You could, every time a graph would go up, it would be like, ooh, ah. It was amazing. It was the best math class I ever had, okay? It was amazing, and they made memes about me the next day, so you know it was good. Okay, since then, and this is out of date, I've done about 1,000 presentations around the country, just like this one. I'm on the road 25, 26 days a month pretty steadily, multiple presentations. They call me the Johnny Appleseed of election integrity. And this is part of the story. This is important that you understand this. So, the Los Angeles Times did a hit piece on me in 2023. They said, meet the man trying to upend voting, starting with California. And when that article came out, it actually was offensive. I was offended by it. Because if you think about it, I'd already been working aggressively for 2.5 years at that point on elections. I wasn't just getting started, but they were sort of right. They were sort of right. I wasn't having much effect around the country, and most of the initial election integrity work around the country is basically a waste of time. And we all started with the assumption that if we get evidence and we present it to our Secretary of State, or we get evidence and we take it to court, or we get evidence and we take it to our legislators and show the fraud, that they'll do something about it. And that's wrong. That's wrong on so many levels, and I had to learn that. First of all, they don't want to change it. It's politically the third rail of politics. Nobody wants to touch anything. Second of all, why are we looking to them to fix it? That's the problem. We're supposed to be fixing it, okay? And it's a big deal, okay? So I had to learn, okay? And it took me most of 2021 to learn that. But by 2022, I was hitting the grassroots really hard and starting to have success, which is why I was starting to have success in California. And people were saying, don't go to California. That place is a waste of time, Dr. Frank. That place is communist. They're right, okay? It's a disaster there. But I'm having more success there than anywhere else in the country. Why? Because the communism is high, the pain level is high, the patriots are awake. I'll go town to town, city to city, county to county. It's easy to get them organized and get them doing the right things, which is why Shasta County's been such a big deal. That's my work. I'm not taking credit. The grassroots is doing the work. Did you hear that they just appointed Clint Curtis to be their new ROV? They call him, their election officials called an ROV, Registrar of Voters. Clint Curtis is the guy who wrote the software in 2004 to cheat the election in Ohio to get the senator elected. Look him up on YouTube. You'll see him testifying before Congress that he wrote the software for that. So he's now an anti-machine guy because he knows that the machines can be used to cheat the elections. So he's going to be running the elections this coming year in Shasta County, and everything is going to be totally transparent. Every ballot's going under a video camera. Every ballot's going to be counted by a citizen. They've got hundreds and hundreds of citizens. It's about 75,000 in that county. Everything's going to be auditable by every citizen in the county. Because you could watch it on video, you can come in and watch and help. We'll sign you up. You can help count. Everything is going to be done to the letter of the law, but really extremely to the letter of the law, so that everything is transparent, auditable, reproducible. They can check everything out. It's a big deal. So while all that's happening in Northern California, you've got some stuff going in Southern California too. I don't know if you heard about Huntington Beach. Huntington Beach, the city there, about 250,000 voters. part of my plan when I teach people, and you guys have seen my 7-step plan, is one of the first things I have them do is I have them form a local team. And one of the jobs on one of the team is to read their own laws. Think about it. We're the government, right? But we don't read our own laws. That's not being the government. We need to start acting like it. So the county leaders, or the city leaders in Huntington Beach, read their own laws. And what did they discover? They discovered they were a charter city, and it says right in their charter that they can run their own elections. So they said, we're going to run our own elections starting in 2026, okay? And they added 120 precincts. They are requiring a single-day election in person with photo ID, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the state is like, you can't do that. You can't do that. You have to follow the state law. And they just say, here's our charter. It says right here. And you signed it, okay? And so the state sued them, and that went to court. And 2 months ago, the county won. Huntington Beach won. What's happening, that I can tell you a story like this, state after state. That's happening all over the country, and that's a big deal. The key is we need evidence at the beginning. That's important because the evidence is what empowers the grassroots to know you have a problem. But what's really winning is not the evidence. What's winning is the people are aware, awake, and engaged. If I were to pick up my phone right now and call Shasta County and say, hey guys, on a whim, I'm driving there tomorrow. Can we meet with the commissioners? Can we have like 100 people standing in the commissioner meeting? We might have 200 overflowing, and the people would be on the streets waving flags, okay? And guys, I love it when the big guys wear their big guns and dress in camo and look all redneck. We plan that. Because then the media takes pictures, and it's on the cover that night, right? The media loves to, taking pictures of redneck MAGA racists, and putting it on the cover. So we scheme all this out. We strategize this. It's great. But I'm just telling you, the reason we're winning is not because of me. We're winning because the community is awake, and they're engaged, and everybody's totally engaged. That's what we need here in Oregon, and I'm going to help you do that. I rambled a little bit, but you get the point. I was having success there because we were starting to use strategic ways of moving forward. And that's what I'm teaching you here. I want you to do strategic ways forward. Patrick Byrne and our friends, he says, Dr. Frank reverse engineered the algorithms you're using to cheat our elections. I like that. That's a good description of what I am. But then he says this. He says there are a dozen tools in their cheating toolbox, and they use whichever combination of tools works best in each situation. Well, in Oregon, I'd say you have 14 tools in their toolbox to cheat, okay? You've got one of the worst elections in the country. You have one of the most vulnerable, least secure elections in the country. And the problem is anytime you get a movement going, like I think Ben Edel's doing a movement here, right? Did I say his name right? It's an initiative to get rid of mail-in voting. Well, almost all the other states don't have mail-in voting, and they still have tons of fraud too. So it's like if you think that you're going to fix your elections by that one thing, you're wrong. It's like you go to the doctor and he says you have a dozen tumors. Well, we're going to take that one out. Well, you're dead, okay? You got to get them all out. And the only way to get them all out is for you to take back local control of your elections. It's not just one thing. Am I against the initiative? No. You can go ahead and have the initiative, especially if it educates the public that you have a problem. But don't expect that to fix the problem. That's not the remedy. The remedy is local control. So all over the country, people are just insane. And Einstein said it. He said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Everywhere I go, people are doing the same things over and over again, expecting to fix their elections. It's just they're all hamster wheels. And I like what Tony Shoup said from Pennsylvania. She said, we're all in the same book, Dr. Frank, but most of us are in the first few chapters. And what happens is I'm doing this every day all over the country, so I get to see all these failed strategies. So my value to you is that I bring, they call me John Appleseed, but I'm not planting as much as I'm cross-pollinating. I'm bringing you the strategies that are working. I'm bringing you the ideas that are successful. And don't do that idea. I already know that one's going to fail. This is the right way to go over here. And so that's where I come in. So let me just give you a thought experiment. What would you do if, say, today, the Canadians invaded us from the northern border? What would you do? He says we'd laugh our asses off. That's what he says. That's a good answer. But that's funny. You threw me off. That's good. So if they invaded us, what would we do? Our first instinct is to grab our guns and run and fight, but that would be wrong. What we should do is we should meet in somebody's basement and lay the maps out for our communities and say, we need to form a perimeter here. We need to protect our wives and children, and we need to find other communities that have done the same thing and work together and plan a defense. And then once we're secure, let's plan an offensive and drive those buggers back into Canada, right? That's strategic. That's acting together and working together. The problem is the election integrity movement around the country is a bunch of individuals on their individual tirades, on their individual directions that they're fighting. It's like sending a single sniper against the enemy. They may be the best sniper there is, but you're going to lose that war. You need to have a general. You need to have tanks. You need to have infrastructure. You need to have strategy. You need to have ammunition. You need to have logistics. You need to have all intel. You have to have all this stuff to fight a war successfully, and that's the problem. We've not been fighting the election integrity battle as a war, and it is a war. It's just been slow and gradual, and we haven't noticed, and now we're in this mess. It's the frog in the pot thing. It's the fifth generation war. Yuri Bezmenov warned us about it back in the 60s. He's a Russian defector. He says the United States is in a state of war, undeclared total war against the basic principles and foundations of our system. And we've essentially lost our way, slow and steady. So we got to fix that. I like what Patrick Byrne, he says, the only reason we haven't lost the war yet is because we have so many guns. I love that. That's probably right. I forgot I was getting my speaker going. You're going to want to hear something. So, all right. Sorry, give me a second. Just make sure I've got that connected. Did you hear that? Yeah, it's connected. All right, good. So you see that. So the solution is not from the top down, which is what I thought. The solution is from the bottom up. And General Flynn has been leading revolutions in other countries for decades. He knows how to take over a country. And it's always the bottom up. It's not the top down. And that's what they've been doing to us. So he's saying, hey guys, wake up everybody. The way we fix this is the bottom up, and we need to fight it like a fifth generation war. So let's start. That's what we're doing. I love Chris Ann Hall. She did a book called Sovereign Duty. The problem is we've all neglected to do what we're supposed to be doing. 30 years ago, you ran your own elections. Grandma and Grandpa were at the polling booth. The PTA moms went door to door and made sure the poll books were correct and precinct books. We ran our own elections. And we've just kind of steadily given that over to somebody else. I like asking this question just to help us realize what's happened. I always say, who's responsible for cleaning the voter rolls? And if you're not allowed to answer, Janice. The Secretary of State if you ask the Secretary of State, they'll say the county clerks are responsible for cleaning. If you ask the county clerk, they'll say the Secretary of State's responsible. But Janice says correctly, we are responsible for cleaning the voter rolls. It's always been us. We just forgot. We used to be the ones who carried the precinct books around and made sure that the right people were at the right residences. We've just forgotten. And so it's like we've become enamored with technology and we're just letting somebody else do it. So guess what? Nobody's doing it. And I'm about to show you the consequences of that. All right, one more introduction stuff and then I'll get us into some data. Uh-oh. I thought I had this going. I guess I didn't. There we go. Here we go. Try again.
Generation away.
Here we go. Sorry.
Freedom is a fragile thing, and it's never more than one generation away from extinction. It is not ours by way of inheritance. It must be fought for and defended constantly by each generation, for it comes only once to a people. And those in world history who have known freedom and then lost it have never known it again.
Anybody know what that's from? His inauguration speech in the 60s in California as California governor. I don't remember, I'm 64, I don't remember in my life fighting for freedom. My whole upgrowth. I don't ever remember standing up until the last few years. So I think we dropped the ball. I think it's up to us to fix it too. So we have to step up. Here's another one for you.
Today's ceremony, however, has very special meaning. Because today, we are not merely transferring power from one administration to another or from one party to another, but we are transferring power from Washington, D.C., and giving it back to you, the people.
That was the inauguration in 2017, and what did we do? We went golfing. I remember thinking, great, he's going to fix everything now, right? We're all waiting for them to fix it, but we're the government. Okay, one more. These are fun, I love these. You saw what happened there, right? That was awesome. Okay, here we go.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason. And that reason was to save our country and to restore America to greatness. And now we are going to fulfill that mission together.
How are we going to fulfill that mission? Are we waiting for him to make us great again? We have to make ourselves great again. And I like what de Tocqueville says. I hope I have that quote here. I do, good. All right. De Tocqueville said, early 1800s, not until I went into the churches of America and heard her pulpits flame with righteousness did I understand the greatness and genius of America. America is great because America is good. If America ever ceases to be good, America will cease to be great. That's why we're not great, guys, because we ain't good. So we need a moral revival. We need a moral awakening. We also need a spiritual awakening. And I mean a political. We need both. We need spiritual and political. And I really think the political mess we're in is because of our spiritual depravity. So really, that's what it's all about. And we the people, have to engage this. We can't wait for somebody else to do the job. Okay, I think I've given you enough head start on what I'm talking with you about. So let's just jump into some data. What do you say? Okay, let's talk about your state, Oregon. I always have a graph for something. So this goes from 1960 to present, and the blue curve is how many people in your state are older than 18 and older. And you'll notice it's just kind of climbing. It's flattened out in recent years. Maybe for 5 years it's flat. The black curve is right from the Secretary of State website, and you were showing me the graph in the car when we were in the car. Yes, these data are right from the Secretary of State, and you've got a cool chart. That's where these are from. This is how many people were registered to vote in your whole state every 2 years. You can see that's why it's kind of every 2 years there's a change. And you notice it just kind of tracked along pretty well for all that time. And my experience tells me, working on every state in the country, that if you're around 70% of your 18 and older population, that's a clean voter roll. That's about right. It's a clean voter roll. So I would say you were pretty clean until here. Something happened in 2014, after 2014, and your voter rolls just went, woo, right past your population. Okay? Anybody know what happened that year? Yes, that's when the state took away control of your voter rolls from your local clerk and started inserting everybody who gets a driver's license, everybody who gets health and human services. Anybody who touches any government agency automatically gets put into the voter rolls. So your voter rolls just started surging suddenly at that point. And I'll show you your county too, so you see what's going on. So that's interesting to see that. Then this curve shows you every 2 years how many people voted. So presidential, midterm, presidential, midterm, presidential, midterm. More people vote in presidential elections than midterms, right? So president, you see what that looks like. You notice that there's a sudden jump right here. Do you see that? Sudden jump, suddenly your turnout suddenly got really higher. That's all over the country that year. Anybody know why? 9/11. Good, that's a good guess, but it's not right. 2002 Help America Vote Act. All the states switched over to electronic voting machines. Why would electronic voting machines make the tallies come out higher? Interesting, huh? Good. Now, if I just move the trend, I'm moving the population trend down, you'll notice that if the rolls hadn't shot up, that your turnout in 2020 would be basically a perfect turnout. So what's happened is they've inflated the voter rolls, which gives them room to cheat. Nobody would believe a 100% turnout. So you got to inflate the voter rolls. And this is why that graph that you made, the voter rolls have been surging, so the denominator is big. So if you notice when you read in the newspaper, they don't say 73,000 people voted. They say we had a 73% turnout. They tell it to you in percents. So I used to teach classes in statistics. I said the easiest way to hide a statistic is using a percentage, because you can manipulate the denominator. And so you can make it come out. You can have any turnout you want. Just clean up the rolls a little bit, and it'll be a higher turnout. Make the rolls a little dirtier, it'll be a lower turnout. So you can change that number however you like it. But right now, about 700,000, say round numbers, you have about 700,000 too many people in your voter rolls. That's about 1 in 3 people don't belong in your voter rolls as a state. About 1 in 3. Anybody who's looked at the voter rolls and knocked on doors has found exactly that. Your voter rolls are a total wreck, okay? All right, so we're in Clackamas today, aren't we? Let's bring Clackamas up here. Washington, Clackamas. You're no exception. This is your population here, climbing since 1980, and it looks like you're also leveling off, maybe starting to trail a little bit. And you had good, clean voter rolls until when? Same time. That's when your clerk, your election officials lost control of your voter rolls. That's when the state took over. In other words, I'm not blaming your local clerk for this. The system that the state is imposing on you is what I'm blaming for this. Now, there's a little light gray curve underneath it you can see. That is the month-to-month number of people in your voter rolls. I took the trouble to download every month in your state, so I can show you that. And you notice it's shot up suddenly right before the 2016 election, which is interesting. Then if I compare the trend, you notice you have the same problem as the rest of the state. You have ridiculously high turnout. Suddenly, your turnout shot way up. Why? And it's still high. Your turnouts are way higher than you would expect based upon your historic norms. But they've inflated the voter rolls so much, they report it to you as a percentage, so you don't even realize that's happened to you. Now, just to give you an example, and I haven't done this yet for your county, but I'm about to. This is for the 2020 election. I'm about to do it for the 2024 election. This blue curve, this dark blue curve here, is how many people are of each age. So this graph goes from 0 up to 110 years old. And it looks like you have about 5,000 people in Clackamas that are about 18 years old. And it looks like you got, 55-year-old, around 6,000 people of that. So it doesn't look like you have a university here, or a big university in Clackamas. When there's a big university, this blue curve takes way off, it goes way up because of the young kids. So anyway, that's your population by age in Clackamas. And then the black curve is how many people are registered in your voter rolls by age. In other words, you have everybody registered above 65 years old. That's very suspicious. If we go knock on doors, we find all kinds of people that are not registered or up in that age, okay? The red curve is who voted in the 2020 election by age. Red curve, looks like everybody voted in Clackamas who's 70 years old and older. Every person voted. That's a little suspicious if you ask. That's suspicious. Mark was telling me he's been calling the old people in the rolls in Clackamas, and he said he's got 107-year-old people.
107 years old.
Yeah. She's like, let's go dancing,
Yeah. Birthday's next week. You're invited.
Yeah. So you do have a lot of old people here, and it must be the air and the water. So good job. Keep it up. But that's a little suspicious if every person is voting. That's a little suspicious if you ask me. But look at the black curve and look at the red curve and just kind of look at them back and forth. Don't they look really similar? So the black curve is who's registered to vote by age, and the red curve is who voted in 2020 by age. And you notice those curves are like interestingly similar. Well, if I make an assumption, if I assume that the ratio between the black curve and the red curve is the same in every county in Oregon, if I make that assumption, then I predict this light blue curve that's underneath. And the correlation coefficient is 0.996, which means it's a pretty good prediction, which means that you vote exactly the same as every other county in the state. Clackamas votes the same as Josephine, votes the same as Bend, votes the same in the same relative proportions by age. That's strange and not believable. And what's fun is I like to go to a county that's right on the border, say with Washington, state of Washington. And then I use the same ratios and go across the border. Doesn't work. But if I study one county in Washington, I can predict all the other counties in Washington. Go over to Idaho, look at one county, I can predict all the other. Because guess what? In every state in America, because I've done this, all the counties track all the other counties within a given state, which proved to me that the elections were being centrally controlled state by state. And that each state has its own central control. That's how I proved it. And that's what Mr. Lindell made the movie about, that I proved they couldn't be real. There are 3 exceptions. There are 3 little counties in Montana. And it was in 2021, late in the year. I was flying into Montana to give a talk, a presentation. It was a big, one of those all day long things, you know. I spoke, Seth Keshel spoke, and Professor Clemens spoke. It was one of these, you know, one after another for all day long. And I got up and I said, hey, everybody, I've run the numbers on Montana for you. Yeah, Montana. And I can predict 53 out of 56 counties. I can't predict these other 3 counties. I don't know why. I'm still working on it. I figured something's wrong with my math. I made a mistake somewhere in there. I'm working on it. When I figure it out, I'll post the correct graphs online for you. And this big old cowboy walks up to the mic. You know, they got a mic there for questions. He walks up to the mic and says, nope, Dr. Frank. He says, see that county right there? They ain't got no internet. The 3 counties I couldn't predict have no internet. They have more cows than houses, right? I mean, it's just rural. So those are the 3 exceptions that I found in the country. Every other county in the country I can predict to a gnat's eyelash. Isn't that interesting? So you have that problem. Now, it's not just you. So let me show you what I mean by it's not just you. If I do every county in your state, Oregon, this is all of your counties, how many people are registered in every election since 1980 to 2024. Multnomah dwarfs all the others, so it's hard to see the small ones, right? But if I normalize it, it's called, I'll put them on a percentage scale, you'll see that it used to be in the 80s and 90s that it was random how many people were registered in the counties. But once the state took over, they all started shooting up together. So you can see that that's not every clerk running back to their office and starting to add people. That's a centrally controlled system. So this is another way to prove to you that you're not in local control of your elections. The state is in control. I can do the same thing with your voting. This is presidential, midterm, presidential, midterm, presidential, midterm. You know, you can see that cycle, but it's hard to see the small counties. But if I normalize, you used to vote randomly around the state, and now you're voting in perfect sync, which is why I can predict the rest of the counties if I study one county. I can predict by age even. It's preposterous because that's the, and I did the same thing for the month-to-month data I have, because I told you I downloaded the data. So these are all the counties month to month, how many people are in the voter rolls. If I normalize it, you can see that all of them surged right before the election, and they're all continuing to climb, except this one little county, Wheeler. How many people live in Wheeler? 4, he says. I don't know if they have internet or not, but probably one day the clerk took 10 people out of the rolls or something. It's a small county, and so it made a big difference, whatever she did. But you get the point. This is not, you can see all little bumps and wiggles, they track each other. This is not clerks individually doing this. This is a state central system. So that's the problem. The problem is you are no longer in control of your elections. The state is in control of your elections, and you need to take it back. Now, because of that, your rolls are really dirty. And I'll just give you an example. A lot of people say, we need to clean the voter rolls, Dr. Frank. Shouldn't we clean the voter rolls? And I always say, well, I don't think so. Let me show you a couple of examples. So here's Kentucky, who's a red state. Right? So I like using the other side of the spectrum too. In 2019, Judicial Watch sued them, like Judicial Watch is suing you right now. Judicial Watch sued them in 2019 for having their voter rolls being out of compliance with federal law. And they won the lawsuit. You notice that their voter rolls were growing faster than their population. Does that sound familiar? Your voter rolls were growing faster than your population. And right before the 2020 election, their voter rolls suddenly surged right past their population. Sounds like my Pennsylvania story, doesn't it? Okay? So what happens, they sued them, and they had to remove several 100,000 of their people from the voter rolls. Then the ACLU countersued, and they put them right back in. So that's one example of why I don't expect the lawsuit that you have to actually fix your problem. I love the lawsuit, and we're going to deploy it to our advantage, but it's not going to really work because we would be expecting the state to take action after it. And I can show you about that. For example, when Judicial Watch sued Los Angeles, they have about 5.3 million people in their voter rolls. They won the lawsuit, and they were required to remove 1.2 million from their voter rolls. And they did, and about 2 months later, their voter rolls were completely full again. But in this case, it wasn't putting back the previous ones, it was putting in new non-real voters. Because I have to know the names of all those people named, and it was amazing. We were tracking every minute of that. I have teams going there tracking every day what was going on. What's going on is crazy. Why? Because the local people are not in control. Outside influences are controlling the voter rolls, and that's at the state level. Now to you, Judicial Watch is suing Oregon to clean up because you're not following state law. Here's what happens. There are two laws, NVRA, National Voter Registration Act, that's 1993, and Help America Vote Act, HAVA. NVRA, HAVA. HAVA's in 2002. What happened is the federal government came to you and said, we'll give you money if you'll do these things in your elections. And so take the money, but you have to perform them in certain ways. And your state took the money, but it's not complying. It's not keeping the rolls clean like they're supposed to. So you're being sued for that. Judicial Watch wins every one of these. And one of the problems you have has been admitted to once again, by your own governor and your own Secretary of State. You have all these people that are illegal. They're not citizens. They're not supposed to be in your voter rolls, and they're voting. And that's a problem. How do they get into the voter rolls? Because every time somebody gets a license, they're automatically put in. If they go for welfare services or health services, they're automatically put in. They don't ask, are you a citizen, before they give them welfare? No, they don't ask, when you get a driver's license. So what's happening is your voter rolls are getting full of that. So when people say to me, we want to clean the voter rolls, Dr. Frank, they do all this work. They take it to their local clerk. The clerk takes the names out of the rolls. Within months, the voter rolls are dirty again. The problem isn't that the rolls are dirty. The problem is that you're not in control of the rolls. So one of the first things I'm going to have you do is download a copy of your voter rolls for your county, and you keep that away from the state. And you break it into precincts, and guess what you're going to do? Just what you used to do. You're going to clean your own precincts, and you're going to have a clean copy of your voter rolls, and that's what you're going to use to run your elections. Your own clean copy. Because otherwise, it's just like cleaning your kid's room. You could spend... the problem is you're not in control if you give it back to the state. You have to keep the control. So that's going to be one of the first things, and that's a long talk. I don't necessarily want to get into that right now. Okay, I think I've given you enough about your voter rolls. It's a big deal. Now let me talk about the presidential election, because I teased that earlier. And then I'm going to connect it all together, and you're going to see what I want you to do next. And then I think it's hot in here, but I think I'm hotter than you because of my bow tie. All right. So what happened in the 2024 election? I'm about to teach you. So I've been predicting elections since 1980, and I got everyone right. I even predicted Trump in 2016, 13 months ahead of time, when there were 17 people in the primary. You might remember that. And I predicted Trump was going to be, and I showed all the math, and everybody said, you're crazy, but the odds were 2-1. It was a clear victory. And the odds were 20-1 in 2020, Trump, and so that was my first one I missed.
Is he going to win in 28?
Not a... That's a really good question. Okay, it's a good question. It's a good joke too, but let me pause. Let me just pause and tell you something. So in 2018, Trump signed an executive order, his 75th that he did, where he established an election integrity investigative committee of the federal government. And he put Pence in charge of it, and Pence disbanded it about 6 months later. But anyway, if there's any doubt about Pence, that should take care of that one for you. But his 83rd executive order, he wrote an executive order, and paraphrased, is if there's foreign interference in the election, the president has the authority to nullify the election and call for to do a new election. He did that in 2018, which is why we were working so hard in 2020, because we could prove the interference in the election, and then that would allow him to nullify the election. We were going to save the country. And I just want to show you what happened 2 weeks ago. I think I have the slide here. Kash Patel. Yep. What did he say? For the 2020 election, we discovered that the Chinese had produced 1 million phony licenses and printed 1 million ballots. And that was brought to the attention of the FBI before the election in 2020, and they didn't do anything about it. So he's announced a probe into this. So we're going to start having all these probes. So now, to your lovely comment, let's say we have an election in 2018 and there's foreign interference. He can use the executive order. He can just say, oops, do over. And he stays the president until we do a good clean election, huh? Wouldn't that be interesting? He did say he was going to have a third term, didn't he? Very interesting. And I wouldn't put it past that guy. He's got a lot of cojones. Yeah, he's got a lot going for him. So anyway, that's a fun little diversion, but I think that's not an accident. That's not an accident. All right, back to the election, yes? All right, I said Trump didn't win in 2024. I mean it. Okay, so I was showing you this graph. So what I'm going to show you is since 1980 to 2024, how many votes did the Republican candidate get or the Democrat candidate get from 80 to 24? So for example, in 1980, Reagan got about 44 million votes nationally. In 1984, Reagan got about 54 million ballots nationally. In 1988, Bush Sr. got about 49 million. See what I'm showing you? I'm showing you how many votes the Republican candidate got in each general election. And whenever I show this, people are always surprised how fickle the right voters on the right are. We didn't turn out at all for Bush Sr. Nor 92. Who was that again? I put the names on it. It was Bush Clinton. That's right. As Bush's second term, no new taxes. Remember that? Yeah. Okay, so anyway, people are always surprised at that. I was too when I first made it, but it's fun to look at data because it changes your perspective on things when you actually look at real data. And so this is the Democrats, and in contrast to the Republicans, they vote really consistently. They, like for example, from 1980 to 2000, the Democrats just follow a nice little linear trend. There's a discontinuity at 2002. Remember I told you about HAVA, that's when they added, that's the whole country has that. And then in 2004, they resume, except for their two exceptions. And I want to talk about that. The 7,000 here, 7 million, and the 10 million. So it follows trends except for the first term of Obama, 7 million, and the first term of Biden, 10 million. So you might remember last year around March, Trump started campaigning vigorously. He came out and he says, we're going to make the election too big to rig. Remember he said that. And so that's an interesting claim. So what did I do? I went back to my hotel room and I did some calculations. And I said, if we were going to make it too big to rig, how many more people would we need to get registered? How many ballots would we need to get to harvest up? It's a big job. And then I looked at the demographics, because you know I study all the population demographics, and I brought in all my data and I made a prediction. I said, if we do an amazing job registering people to vote, harvesting their ballots, encouraging them to get out the vote stuff, and like TPUSA was doing, and et cetera, around the country, I said the best we're going to be able to do is a 3% increase. And so that's a stupid idea, because we're up against 10 million excess ballots, and a measly 3% is not enough. So I called Mike Lindell, because we're friends. Hey, Mike, tell the president, stop saying this. This is a dumb idea. We need to fix our elections. We're not going to win by making it too big to rig. We can't make it too big to rig. The best we're going to get is 3%. I started publishing it all on my social media. It's a bad idea. Don't do this. We need to clean our elections. Stay focused, people. Stay on fixing the elections. That's what I was telling everybody. But so Trump stopped saying that for about 4 or 5 months. Then as the election approached, TPSA and the Republican Party started glomming on. The swamp is just as deep on our side too, swamping up on Trump, and then that became the messaging up to the end. Well, how much did Trump go up? 3%. Exactly what I predicted, okay? And people were shocked. How did you predict that? I know the demographics. I know what we're up against, and there's a principle here. And so let me just bring it to a conclusion, and I'll show you some more data so you'll understand a little better. Trump did not make the election too big to rig. He went up 3%. What really happened is Kamala lost 10 million votes. She lost 10 million votes. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to dive into that a little bit so you'll see how that happened. A lot of people think, well, we stopped the cheat. No, we didn't stop the cheat. All kinds of cheating in the 2024 election, all over the country. The bottom fell out underneath the Democratic Party. I think God gave us a miracle. I think he kept Biden alive. And, maybe, yeah. And the point is, right up to the last minute, that was their candidate, and that's not a good candidate. And then they were stuck with Kamala, right? And she's a dud. Okay, and I'm about to show you what happened. But before I show that, let me show you what happened in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is what the Republican Party is going around telling everybody, see, we saved the country, we saved Pennsylvania. No, this is how many people got registered in 2016 for the Republicans. This is how many got registered in 2020 for the Republicans. This is how many new Republicans there were in 2024. And that's the biggest get out the vote effort they've ever had and the biggest registration drive they've ever had. What's happening is there are fewer and fewer left. Most Republicans are already registered, and most of them are already voting. You're going after smaller and smaller leftover and working harder and harder to get. It's called the law of diminishing returns. You're working harder and harder for a smaller and smaller amount, and I've already done the calculus for the 2028 election. The best the Republicans are going to do is maybe 2% more. Okay? So that's not enough to get over our 10 million hurdle of cheating, is it? We got to fix our elections. Yes?
What about Charlie Kirk?
What about Charlie Kirk? He's the one that did the TPUSA thing. That was a failure. That was a failure. He failed. Let me show you how that worked. If I were to, okay, and I'm going to show you that here. So you remember this graph? I'm going to do something funny to it. I'm going to squash it. Okay, go. Hello. There it is. Okay. Okay. So what this is on the left, this is 1980, Reagan, and on the right, this is Trump, 2024. So this is the whole country all squashed. See what I'm saying? The nice thing about it is you can see, Trump went up to 3%, there's the 3%, but you can see the whole country. Now, the population was rising. That's why it slopes up like that, right? Because our population went up, so there are more and more. This is just the number of votes that the presidential candidate got. Why did I do that? Because now I'm going to show you every state in the country. And if you look, say, at Texas, you'll notice that, look at the last two bars. Trump went up in Texas about 5%. So in Texas, but the population was also going up. So how much of that is really more popularity for Trump or not? But anyway, it went up. In Florida, Trump went up. In California, Trump went down, about 3% down in California. And that's where all the churches were doing all the ballot harvesting. And they failed. It went down in California. They got fewer ballots for Trump in 2024 than in 2020. Pennsylvania.
Everybody left Texas and Florida.
What's that?
Everybody moved to Texas and Florida from California.
There you go. California went down. Pennsylvania went up about 4%. New York, it went up even more, where they didn't do any of that ballot harvesting stuff. So Trump went up more in New York, where there was no effort like that. And then Ohio, where I live, it went down, and there was a massive effort there. And Trump won there in a good margin, like 10% win. Okay, so it's not like he's not popular. But we lost votes. And all the Republican Party motion was, we're getting people registered to vote, we're chasing ballots, that's what was going on there. North Carolina up a little bit, Michigan, but Illinois went down, Virginia up a tiny. In other words, I don't see any huge successes anywhere there. In terms of making the election too big to rig. It looks about the same, or maybe a little up. If I show you the next, they're sorted from largest to smallest. Do you see any huge, massive improvements anywhere? No, in fact, in many places he went down. So we didn't make the election too big to rig. I got to show you Oregon. Did I skip Oregon? Here you are, Oregon. You went down. Whatever you did here, you got fewer votes for Trump in 2024 than you got in 2020. About 5% fewer.
Data even real data?
Good question. Is that even real data? That's how many ballots were reported for him. Yes, fair question.
How much did the illegal vote count on this data?
I didn't. That's not what I'm showing you yet.
Okay.
But we can talk about that.
There's a major influx, of course, with Biden.
Yes. So now let's look at the Democrats, state by state. California, Kamala went down 3.5 million votes. Kamala went down in her own state. So when I was in California recently, the Republicans there were saying, we took back 9 counties, we took back 9 counties. No, the Democrats lost 9 counties. Trump went down in California, remember? He went down, the Democrats just went down more. So I use the example, you show up at the football game and your team's all ready to go and the other side shows up and they're all on crutches. Okay? You win the game. Did you win? No, the other team lost. That's what happened. The other team, the Democrats, showed up on crutches. I mean, they had Drool Master and they had and Kamala. I mean, that's just like a dud of a team. No wonder they lost, right? They didn't turn out their own base. Their own base didn't turn out. Look across the country. Texas, she went down. Florida went down. New York went down. Down in New York. Pennsylvania down. Illinois down. You see what I see? Every one of these, she drops. Nationwide, the bottom fell out from underneath the Democrats. Thank God is right. Now the problem with these graphs is they all go up because the population's growing. But you know me, I'm trying to show you the raw data first before I do anything to it, because I don't want you to think I'm like cheating with statistics. I show you the actual data first. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you some ratios. I'm going to ratio the Republican to the Democrats, so it takes out the population trend. And so now they're sorted in alphabetical order. So if the Republican candidate and the Democrat candidate got the same number of votes, it would be 1. The ratio would be 1. So look at Alabama, it's first. You'll notice that Alabama is becoming more Republican since Reagan. Since 1980 to present, the ratio between Republicans to Democrats is becoming higher and higher. So I didn't say it's becoming more conservative, I said it's becoming more Republican. That's different. But still, more Republican. But Arkansas down, Arizona down, go across the country, almost all the states are headed down. The trends are down. Show you the next 50. Where's Oregon? You're coming up next, I guess, because you're after in. Just across the country, over and over again, they're going down. And where's Oregon? Here you are. You're definitely becoming less Republican. And relative to the Democrats, you did worse in 2024 than you did in 2016, but slightly better than 2020. But we know that's not because you did so well turning out votes. It's because Kamala fell even more, right? Because I already showed you those raw numbers. So that's a lot to look at in a hurry, so I've summarized it in a table. And I hate showing tables because you don't want to look at all the numbers. But it's a quick way for me to summarize all those trends for you. The blue states are the ones that Kamala won, and the red ones are the ones that Trump won. And I've sorted them from the most favorable to Kamala to the least. So in Wyoming, Trump was like 2.7 votes for every 1 vote for the Democrat. So, and here's where it switches over between the two. And what I did is I tracked the trends. So if I track the trend from 1980 to present, that includes Reagan, this is the trend. And I call this a Republican Party presidential report card because the trend is, if it's red, that means it's against the Republicans. If it's black, it means it's for the Republicans. So this is the long-term trend, and this is the short-term trend. Because Reagan was so popular, it kind of distorts some of the trends. So I didn't want to, I took him out. So what you'll notice is that these 7 swing states, the ones that made the election go our way, or Trump's way, the long-term trend is against the Republicans in every one of them. The trend is against the Republican candidate. In the short-term trend, 4 out of the 7 are against the Republicans. And, you know, Wisconsin just eked it out. And I've summarized these are the swing states. And you can see the trend is not good in these swing states, okay? So you have the trend against us. Then there's also the historic pattern. The pattern says whoever wins the presidency, the other party wins the midterm. That happened in 2016. Remember, Trump won in 2016, and the Democrats took to 2018. And Trump had a 240 majority he had 240 in Congress, Republicans, and he still lost the midterm. And what happened in the midterm? They impeached him. He's starting this time with only 220 instead of 240. And it's tight, and they're arguing about the great, big, beautiful bill, and they're fighting against his tariffs. And we're right on the hairy edge, but all the trends are against us, including the patterns. So I'm trying to scare you a little.
You are. Good job.
We're toast. I think unless God gives us another miracle, the midterms we're going to lose. And then Trump's going to get impeached again, just like last time. Are you kidding? They're going to jump all over that, just like they did last time. So this is my appraisal of our current situation. We have 1 year. We have 1 year to ratchet in and capture of our progress and take back control of our elections. And you in Oregon have something amazing. You have the DOJ coming in and investigating you, voter rolls for being out, the Department of Justice for being out of compliance with federal law. You have Judicial Watch suing you. 2 weeks ago was the hearing where they were trying to get it dismissed against them. We haven't heard the ruling yet. I haven't seen Judicial Watch fail yet. It's possible, I suppose, but Jonka says it's 50-50. I'm going 80-20. Okay, that there's going to be a case that goes forward in your state. Imagine a scenario like this. A ruling comes down that says your voter rolls are out of compliance with federal law and out of compliance with state law, but you use your voter rolls to mail ballots to everybody. That means the system you're using is out of compliance with state and federal law, huh? Now imagine that you have a team here in your county that's gone around through the voter rolls and knocked on doors and gathered evidence and found all sorts of cases of actual fraud. Dead people who voted, people who don't live here who voted. And you document these cases very carefully. These are not statistics. These are, you knocked on the door, you talked to the widow. We've got the voting record from Texas and the voting record from here, and they voted in both places. We've got all the hard evidence. Now imagine that before anybody knows, we go and we visit the sheriff, which I've been doing. You have great sheriffs in this state, okay? You may not know it, but you have some really good sheriffs in the state. We take those data to your sheriff, and we show it to the sheriff, and he goes, wow, I'm assigning case numbers to all those, okay? And then we meet in private with your county commissioners, and we say, I know you're in Clackamas, so you're thinking I'm in La La Land, but Oregon is a red state with a couple of blue dots. Your state is red, amazingly red. So imagine me in one of these counties, and everybody thinks all the fraud's in Multnomah up in Portland. No, it's everywhere in your state because your elections are centrally controlled. So we find the fraud in every county. So I go up to these conservative sheriffs in these conservative small red counties and say, look at the fraud in your election. And they're like, what? Not in my county. Yep, here's the evidence. So they sign case numbers. You meet with the county officials. When I testified in Coos County, I had that debate a few months ago in Coos County. Rob Taylor is the commissioner, the head commissioner there. He was skeptical when I met with him in private. And I said, yeah, you have huge problems in your elections. And he says, oh, really? And I said, yeah, you got all kinds of people who are voting in your elections who are not really here. And he says, oh, really? Give me a list. So I gave him 20 names, 20 addresses. And he and his wife went out and knocked on doors. And the first 7 doors he knocked on, he found a fraudulent ballot at every one of those doors. And so when I was having that public debate with Justin Grimmer, it was a 3.5-hour work session in Coos County. It was awesome. Justin Grimmer says, oh, yeah, you don't have any fraud here, and blah, blah, blah. And then Rob Taylor just says, well, wait a minute. I knocked on the list that Dr. Frank gave me. He only gave me 20. He's got a list with hundreds. Hey, the first 20, me and my wife quit knocking on them after 7, because the first 7 out of 7 were fraudulent votes in our election. It was beautiful, beautiful moment. Okay. So the point I'm making is, now imagine that you go into these small red counties, you actually find real fraud, you show it to the sheriff, he's upset about it, he signs case numbers, you show it to the county officials, they're upset about it, you show it to you're going to be shocked when I say this, you show it to the GOP leaders. You guys have a horrible GOP in this state, but you have pockets of brilliant GOP. Okay? And we've met with a few of them, and we show them, and they're like, oh man, we don't like this, we want to fix this. So now just imagine, this is a hypothetical, sort of. Imagine that the ruling comes down from Judicial Watch. Boom, your voter rolls are out of compliance with federal law. Boom, in fact, they're out of compliance with your own state law. And because of that, your elections are vulnerable. Then imagine that 3 counties all stand up, and they say, as a matter of fact, we've been looking into this, and we have fraud and illegal voting in our elections. In fact, every one of these fraudulent ballots is disenfranchising one of our citizens from their vote. Their constitutional rights, their civil rights are being violated by this state system that's being imposed upon us by the state. And the sheriff says, as a matter of fact, I swore an oath to defend the constitutional rights of the citizens of my county. I'm going to interpose on behalf of my county. And the county leaders say, we swore an oath to defend our citizens and the constitutional rights of our citizens. And the citizens are all standing up and saying, we're not going to use the state system anymore. We're going to stand up against the state, okay? But we're not breaking any laws. We're going to actually follow the laws that the state isn't following. We're going to follow the state and federal laws in these counties. And they're going to say, we don't have to comply with the Secretary of State's rulings and policies, because we can prove that those rulings and policies are disenfranchising our citizens from their constitutional rights. Therefore, we have an obligation to interpose on behalf of our citizens and protect them. We're running our own elections. So imagine this scenario. 1 week, Judicial Watch, ruling comes down. Next week, boom, 3 counties stand up and say, we're not going to comply. We're going to comply with state and federal law. We're running our own elections, pound sand. And then the next week, 6 more counties, like Clackamas, because you guys are not going to be one of these leading counties because you have crappy leaders, okay? But there's a team here. And the team stands up and says, as a matter of fact, we had the exact same problem here that these counties. What's wrong with our leaders? How come they aren't interposing on behalf of our civil rights? We have civil rights too, and you're not alone. So what we've done is we're going to make this a state problem. Shasta County, Northern California is very exciting for me. I learned a lot of lessons there. One of the lessons I learned is it's a mistake to fight with only one county. Every time they do anything, the state passes all these laws to stop them. It's like tit for tat. And they're trying to stop the other counties from joining in. So we're going to act together. We're going to fight a war. We're not going to be a bunch of individuals fighting individually. We are going to organize our counties, and we are going to act together. And we're going to say to the state, pound sand. So you see how this works? And you guys are perfect for this, because you're red as heck in all these small counties, and you have great sheriffs in those small counties, and you have fraud everywhere, so it's easy to find in every county. See where I'm going? And you have the Judicial Watch stuff coming down, you got the DOJ, and all this is coming to a nexus. So you want to get rid of mail-in voting, you're not going to get rid of it by doing a state initiative that you then put on the ballot. You follow me? You don't fix broken elections with broken elections, okay? I'm not against Ben doing it. I think he should keep doing it. But if you're expecting it to give you the remedy, you're living in la land, okay? Because, and once again, it's convincing us to sign a petition and then stand back and wait. That's the problem. We're the government. We need to start acting like it. We're always waiting for somebody else to do the work. No, we're the government. We're going to do it. So, like, let's say that the governor says tomorrow, we're going to back a truck up to the church and you all bring your guns down and turn them in. I love that answer. She's like, oh, yeah, right. The answer is, which end do you want first, right? We're not going to give them our guns, are we? No, we're not going to do that. Why? Because we have rights, and we have constitutional rights, and we're not going to comply with any state law or policy which removes our constitutional rights, which violates our constitutional rights. We're not going to comply. Well, guess what we're about to prove? We're about to prove that the state system that they're imposing on you to run your elections is violating your constitutional rights, and we're going to prove it county after county after county. And so when the government says, give us your ballots, we're going to say, pound sand, which end do we want first? These are our ballots, our election. We're not going to comply. We're going to comply with the law, not your policies, because your policies are disenfranchising us from our constitutional rights. See what we're going to do? And we're going to act together. And can you imagine the state that's the first state to do mail-in ballots for everybody would be the first state that would say, bad idea, we're going to quit doing this. Wouldn't that be lovely? It would send a message all across the country, and you guys would affect the future of America. You are like perfectly situated for this in so many ways. That's why I'm here for so long. If you're waiting for the government to fix it, I always show this. By the way, these are data provided by the John Birch Society. It's called the freedomindex.org. And what they've done is, this is for the 118th Congress, how many people vote in the Congress vote consistently with the Constitution, how many of them vote always against the Constitution. And the blue dots are the Democrats in Congress and the red are the Republicans. And you notice that we have some that defend the Constitution, many that are compromised, some communists in disguise, and communists. If you're expecting this Congress to fix our elections, you're dreaming. It ain't going to happen. They can barely get legislation and bills passed. All right, now here's your state. And I've reversed the axis. This is really it's just listed in order. So here are your Democrats, and here are your Republicans. Your Republicans don't even represent the Constitution. There's this whole idea that we have to compromise in order to get anything done. But in all these red districts and red areas, why are you compromising? There's no reason for you to do that. I just came from Montana. I have a great legislator there. Her name's Teresa Manzella. In their Senate, they have 50 people in the Senate. They won in 2024, 32-18, a majority of Republicans. And they were all excited when the legislative session started this year. Boy, we got a big majority. We're going to fix the state. We're going to do all this great stuff. We have a great agenda, conservative agenda. The first week that session opened, their legislative session opened, 9 of the Republicans, 9 R's, caucused with the Democrats immediately after. So now the conservative agenda is in a minority, and they were unable to do anything. What's happening is, if you want to get elected in Montana, in most of those red counties, you've got to pretend to be a Republican, get elected, and then you can act like a Democrat afterwards. We call those rhinos, right? The Republican in name only. You're full of those. And so that's a huge problem too. That's happening in your primaries. Your party is taking out your conservative candidates in the primaries, yes.
I would like to see a breakdown of which legislators are Republicans you consider and why that they are rhinos.
Okay. I just happen to have that. Thank you. You get it. I'm a very disciplined person. I only make statements I can back up, in case you haven't figured that out. So let me just duplicate this. So, can you all see this? So, I can go state by state. You can see I can change it. I've got this automated so I can look at every single state. So let's bring up, Oregon was already there, sorry. Okay, so here's Oregon. So you want to know what one of these red dots are over here, right? Okay. Art Robinson, Kimberly Wallen, Eric Reschke, Christine Goodwin, Daniel Bonham, Dennis Linthicum, Jamie Kate, Lily Morgan. Now I'm down to 80%. Vicki Breeze Iverson, Court Boyce. Those are the ones that list themselves as Republicans.
And you're saying they're not?
They are.
Based on what?
They're not voting conservatively.
Well, I'd like to see what those votes are.
That's a good question. Her question was, she'd like to see how they were rated. How were they rated constitutionally or not? That's a great question.
Wait, are you saying Art Robinson is one of the rhinos on the low end or on the high end? What about Linthicum?
Robinson, well, actually, no, Robinson doesn't have a rating yet, sorry. I'll zoom in so you can see what I'm looking at. He didn't have a rating yet, sorry. No rating yet, because
They're good guys or bad guys?
these are the ones that are voting the most conservatively in the state, sorry.
Okay.
These are the most conservative in the state.
Red aren't there anymore.
This was this session. This was this session. The 2023 regular session.
Way up, 2024 was the session.
She wants to study that a little bit.
I just think it's really important that we just finished our session, and we, for the most part, the Republicans stuck together and fought really hard in the super minority against the Democrats, and I just have a hard time hearing you say how they're actually communist.
This was 23, I'm sorry. The 2023 regular, because I don't have the updated ones. But if I got them, I appreciate that. I don't mind at all. Take me down to the carpet. That's good. And she wants to see these numbers for the current session. So go to freedomindex.org, and then you'll see, and they'll see which issues they rated them on too. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just don't want to disincentivize. I mean, we have some awesome Republicans that we need to stick together, and I don't want to back them. We have some rhinos maybe, but we've got some great ones.
It looks like you have a lot of rhinos.
A lot of what?
A lot of rhinos. It looks like you have, how many do you think are good caucusing together? 10, 15?
At least 15, but I don't know the breakdown, but I just...
That would look like about this group up here, something like that.
I need to measure them based on just, whatever the data is.
Yeah, and I accept that. And that's why I told you where I got the numbers.
We are in Oregon.
Yeah.
They do have to strategize for the districts that they are trying to stay elected in.
Very good.
There's a lot that goes into it.
You and I agree on that. And what I would say is, if you're expecting that legislature to fix your elections, though, that ain't going to happen.
We need bigger numbers.
And so I wasn't trying to bash your legislature as much as I was trying to say, if you're waiting for them to fix your elections,
They're in a super minority.
you ain't going to happen. That's my point. So, and fair enough. Maybe I was too hard on them, but I could show you other states and they're voting much more consistently with the Constitution. What's that?
You weren't part of that.
Well, okay. So whenever you say anything, you can make some people mad. But I appreciate your comment. Your comment's valid. You want to see how they made those ratings, and I accept that. Okay. So let's get this. I love that actually. I like it that you felt comfortable to take me on. That's important. Okay. What's that? TheFreedomIndex.org. It's the John Birch website. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to try to. I've been teaching you a lot. Yes. Okay. I know it's hot. I'm burning up here. The ladies already liked me too much. I don't want to I'm kidding. I'm playing. Yeah, that's right. I don't show my tattoos, Bob says. Let me see if I can pick up where I left off. I'm being playful. I've been married 43 years, 3 kids. My oldest daughter, Nellie, has Down syndrome. I have an amazing family. Let me just show you something to help you understand. This is an example. This is Washington County voter rolls. I've got 5 copies of the rolls. January of 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. One of the first things you're going to run into is you'll talk to your clerk and you'll say, Dr. Frank said that you're not in control of our voter rolls. And your clerk will say, that's not true. I'm in control of my voter rolls. And they become very defensive, right? And I clean the voter rolls and blah, blah, blah. I'm telling you, I've done this a million times. That's what's going to happen. So what I do is I sit down with them and I say, okay, in January 21, you had about 438,000 in your voter rolls. And in January 22, you had about 449. So, you went up about 20,000 or something like that, right? She's like, well, yeah, our population grew. And I say, yeah, but that isn't what happened. What really happened is 21,500 were removed from your rolls and 33,500 were added. And she says, well, that's normal, she'll say, because we do voter roll maintenance. And we remove inactive voters and dead voters and people that move away and whatnot. And then you could say, no, because I do the name-to-name comparison. I know every one they added and every one they removed. I say, no, 19,000 of the 21,500 you removed were active voters. Only 2,000 of them, 2,500 of them were inactive voters. Okay? And it's the same every year. Yeah.
They're only counting the active?
They're removing more active voters than inactive voters. The ratio is like 10 to 1.
But if they were active voters, any of us, if we didn't get a ballot, we would be alarmed and go to the election office and go, hey, I didn't get my ballot.
So do you remember when I said and showed you the graph that your voter rolls shot up? All those new voters are active voters. So they're adding all these people to your rolls who are not real voters because they end up taking them right back out again. And what happens is they're churning that list. And so every year they're taking huge numbers back off your rolls and putting in huge numbers of new people into your rolls. And so it doesn't look like anything's happening. It's just kind of climbing gradually. No, it's going down a huge amount and up a huge amount. I just finished Clackamas this morning. I could bring the spreadsheet up. In Clackamas County, I guess this is Clackamas County, isn't it? I see your hand.
They, like you said, it was Hillary Clinton in Pennsylvania. Who's the they?
Who's the they? In your state, it's ERIC, E-R-I-C, the Election Registration Information Center. You pay a service to clean your voter rolls for you, and they do that. There's not, your Secretary of State doesn't, she probably doesn't know how to run Excel. There's nobody sitting there doing this. They contract it out to a non-government organization. That does, and you pay them for it. And so that's who's they are. Now,
why they do that?
What?
They don't tell them why they contract it out.
Because they're clueless.
No.
No, that's what governments do. Governments don't do anything. They pay for everything, right?
But it's also so you can't request and get them.
Oh, his point is the reason they go to a non-government agency is you can't FOIA it. So you don't get to see what they do, except we do if we're smart about it, and we use multiple copies of the voter rolls, which is what I'm doing. I'm using multiple copies, so I'm tracking what they're doing to your voter rolls. You follow me? I have a list of every one of these names, the people that they removed, and I know every name and address of everybody they added. Yes, sir.
Question. Can you see who are students?
Yes.
Here and then they cut out.
Yes. Yes.
What do you find?
His question was, can you track if they were students or not? And what do you find? And that, I promise I'm going to come back to that. Let me finish this, because then I'm going to show you something that addresses that exact question. Is that fair? Let me finish this, and then I'll come to that. So what you notice is that there's a lot of churn, we call this. And churn, if you imagine, I think I've got a graph for this, a description. Yeah. So churn, imagine you have a county that has 100 people in it, 100 residents, and say that 10 of them move away and 10 move in. So that would be 20 changes out of 100. We call that a 20% churn. There are 20 changes in your voter rolls. I finished Clackamas this morning. In 4 years, you have a 50% churn. 50. 50% of your rolls has changed in a mere 4 years.
That doesn't even sound right.
It doesn't even sound right, because it isn't. They're adding huge numbers and removing huge numbers every year from your rolls. Now, what's happening is it's not just people they're adding and removing who didn't vote. What happens is when you go from January 21 to 22, they're already removed 5% of the people who voted in 2020. So people who voted, they're taking out 5%. By the time we got up to January 2025, we're down to, they've taken out 15% of the people who voted. 1 in 6 people of the people who voted in 2020 is no longer in your voter rolls. 1 in 6 after only 4 years. Why are they doing that? You have people in the voter rolls who are voting and then they're taking them out. What does that sound like? That's what I told about Pennsylvania. They're putting people in the voter rolls who are not real voters. Ballots are being stuffed for those people, and then the system is naturally cleaning them out. The churn is a self-purging, self-cleaning system that's in place. And last night, I love Mark. Mark has been looking up for, trying to find all these dead voters. And I jumped a little too quickly last night when he said it. He said, I've been using the voter rolls and I've been looking up all the old people and I'm just not finding any dead people. And I said, well, wait a minute, back up. Which rolls are you using? He says, I'm using the most recent rolls. Oh, you mean the ones that they've already taken out all the fraudulent ballots from? Follow me? They're constantly cleaning up. It's a cleaning system that's constantly removing the data. So then today I met with the Washington, I see your hand, I met with the Washington County team, and that's exactly what they showed me. They said, Dr. Frank, we found a whole bunch of dead voters in the rolls who were listed as dead here in the middle. But actually they died in 2020 and they voted in the next 2 elections. But then in 2025 they were removed from the rolls. So they weren't removed until later. So if you're looking for those, you're not going to see them when you go, because they've been taken out. See the problem? So in other words, you're not in control of the rolls, somebody else is. And they're using those names, the cheaters are using those names to stuff ballots, and then the system is just cleaning them out. So it's like cleaning up your tracks after you. Yeah.
So are they mostly getting those names from people who have died, or from people here illegally, or where are all these names?
So yeah, where are all the names coming from? Well, right now your systems, you have all these automatic systems in your state that are just pumping your rolls full. That's why it's shooting past. And your cleaning systems are not keeping up. So you've just got this big surplus. And I think I didn't show you that. When I'm done with this, I got to show you something else. But I have to answer his question first. So your systems are just, this system is set up to just keep your voter rolls full of non-real voters.
But were these at one time real voters and they passed
yeah.
away or moved or whatever?
Yeah. Like in Pennsylvania. 10 years ago, they brought the old voters back into the rolls. Yes. They churned them back in again. Yes. Now, he said, what about college campuses and colleges and universities? Says that a fact. So when I was here in March, I think this is March, yeah. When I was here in March, I did 9 counties manually. It was a lot of work. I'm trying to automate it, and I'm about to do your whole state, but and this is the churn. The blue is the churn after only 3 years, from 21 to 24. So it's 4 copies of the voter rolls, 1, 2, 3 year span. In 3 years, the churn in Benton County was over 55%, was about 55%. In Clackamas, the churn was 40, Clatsop 42, Columbia 38 or something like that. You see what I'm showing you here? The blue is the amount of churn. And the churn is that high in every one of the counties that I studied. So but Benton has a university. And so when people say, when you say there's a lot of churn, people always say, well, it's just the university. The kids coming in and going out. No, you can see the effect of the university. It's about 10%. But the others, all around 40. And I bet you when I do the whole state, it's going to be about the same everywhere in the state. Why? Because it's centrally controlled. And I show you that all the graphs are following the same thing. The red curve tells you how many people they took out who voted in the 2020 election. So look at Polk County. Let's just round it up to make the math easy. 1 in 5 people who voted in the 2020 election in Polk County are no longer in the rolls 3 years later.
Isn't that how they're going to do? That all those people are voting, eventually that turn will catch up.
Eventually the churn they just own it. Somebody else had their hand up. Yes. Did I answer your question, by the way? Go ahead.
So going back a little ways when you talked about 3 counties, grassroots.
Yeah.
Rising up and, challenging the state. But if in the state, and I don't know how familiar you are with our laws or myself, if in the state there's non-citizens voting and the state's okay with it, what do we do? What's it matter if we found that type of fraud or sent our voter rolls?
Are you okay with it? She's not okay with non-citizens voting in her election. I'm not okay with non-citizens voting. You're not okay with non-citizens voting. All of you are not okay with non-citizens voting in your elections. Why are you letting them tell you, the government, how to run your election? That's why we don't win with the evidence. We win when the community knows there's a problem, the community is awake, and the community engages. So it's a whole nother 2 hours that I could go into, and I could show you the strategy, but this is a big part of it. We're waking everybody up, and we get you organized, and we help you. Every one of you can go out and find fraud. And it's amazing. When you find fraud for yourself, it's like you got saved. You just have to tell everybody, okay? It's very motivating. And so we're trying to build a public movement. Yes, sir?
Getting back to this ERIC system.
Yeah.
A lot of states have gotten rid of it.
Yeah, about a dozen last year.
Isn't this why Tina Peters went to jail? Because this is what she discovered, that they attempted to change the voter rolls after the ERIC system went in, and she took a picture before and after?
Tina Peters is the Mesa County clerk, Colorado, who I met with in April of 2021. Sat in her office, showed her fraud in her own election after 3 days of door knocking, and she says, "Oh no, what do I do now?" I said, "You have an election coming up in a month. We better get everything backed up." So we sent a guy in, long story short. He did forensic backups of their machines before, during, and after their spring election and during their trusted build, it's called. Dominion came in to reprogram that. And the reason they sent her to prison is not for that. They had trumped up a bunch of charges against her and can put her in prison for that. And the reason they did that, in the prosecuting attorney's own words, we're making an example out of her so that no clerk in the country will ever question the integrity of the machines again, okay? And as I've traveled the country, I run into clerks all the time, and when we show them the fraud, their blood drains from their face, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I don't want to be Tina Petered." They say that right to my face. And so I assure them, you're not the problem. Your citizens love you, most counties. Your citizens love you. We don't think you're the problem. It's the state system that's the problem, and the state system that's being imposed on you that you're being forced to use is the problem. Well, we got good news for you. We, the people in our community, are telling the state we're not going to comply with their stupid system anymore because it's disenfranchising us from our constitutional rights, and we're the government. We're stepping in, and we're going to empower you to run the election in the proper way, and we're going to help you. We're going to step up and be the citizens again. That's how we win. And when we do that, we win. That's sort of a long answer, but she went to prison just because they don't like that. Now, I was at CPAC in February with Mr. Lindell, and we prepared a whole report that we gave to President Trump. And in that meeting, Mike got to go into the White House with President Trump for 90 minutes, and we'll go over all of our requests for election integrity stuff. And I've been at Bedminster, his golf course, before with him and Mike and Tina at the same dinner table. We've had long talks. So I know that Trump knows who Tina is. So when Mike Lindell told Trump that Tina was in prison, Trump pointed to his 6 attorneys in the room. He says, "Get her out," okay? And the next week, the Department of Justice announced a lawfare investigation into the state of Colorado because they're on record as saying we're making an example out of her for the rest of the country. I mean, it was a lawfare whole thing. Okay, well, the state of Colorado appealed that and said, to get it dismissed against them. And that already went to court, and it was upheld. There's going to be now a formal lawfare investigation in the state of Colorado, led by the Department of Justice against the state of Colorado. That's happening. Yeah. But in the meantime, Tina Peters, this beautiful 69-year-old lady is just a good clerk, good public servant, honest lady, is sitting there rotting away in prison. And we're not happy about it. So we've been putting pressure on, 47. And he posted a tweet a few weeks ago, if you didn't see it, says, we're going to declare Tina Peters to be a national whistleblower and take her out under federal protection. So I don't know what's going to happen, but anyway, that's what's going on. And I'm supposed to wrap it up. Let me show you one last graph, and then we can have some questions, because she's trying to save time for questions. So I just to show you one more graph. This is for the 2024 general election. And what I've done is on this axis, I'm showing you what percent of your population that's voting eligible is registered. So voting eligible means they're 18 and older, they're a citizen, they're not a felon, they can vote. So what percentage is registered? And then on this axis, I'm going to show you what percent of your voting eligible people voted. So notice that I'm not showing you the percent turnouts of registered voters. That's a meaningless number, because I can change that by just changing the denominator. I want your turnout to go down, I inflate your voter rolls. If I want your turnout to go up, I clean up your voter rolls. So I'm showing you versus your actual population. And I spent a lot of time doing this for every state in the country, and that's what I'm about to show you. So what happens is, I've learned, if a voter rolls has more than 90% of its voting eligible population registered, it's bad shape. The voter rolls is in very bad shape. 90% above is highly suspect. You should never have more than 100% of your voting age population. That would be preposterous, yes? Okay, get ready. All right. And so, and then there's a place up here, and I grade out, because if you had 70% of your eligible people registered and 70% of your eligible people voted, that'd be 100% turnout. So this is the 100%. Nobody's going to be up there. That's the 100% line. That's the 90% line. If you had more than 90%, that's pretty high turnout. That's probably suspect. 75%, 55%. This is where it would be ideal. And when people are surprised by that. Why is that ideal? A clean voter rolls should be about 70 to 80%. That's a good clean voter rolls. I've been studying the rolls all across the country. If you're in that region, you've been keeping them good and clean. And then a turnout of about 50 to 65% is historically, you can look for hundreds of years in America, that's a good turnout of the actual real voters. So that's to me where I wish the whole country was, right in there somewhere. So I got my data from the census and from each individual state. I spent several days, I put these graphs up in January. So there are 9 states that have more people in the voter rolls than they have people. 9 states. So you're not the only one with 30 voter rolls. Okay. So 9 states, so that's a pretty bad situation. And surprising, this is the rest of the country. And you notice that all around the country, the rolls are dirty. And it's because all of the states have switched over to central control, not just yours. Some are worse than some of the others. Here, you guys are up here. Some of the worst, one of the worst. There's an interesting anomaly over here with Wyoming. Wyoming has an interesting state law. If you miss an election, they take you off the rolls. You're off. Okay. If you want to get on again, you show up at the next election with your license and your proof of residency, and you show, and they don't stop you from voting. You just have to prove who you are every time if you miss. If you vote every time, you can keep going, okay? So they're a little hyper clean. If you ask me, they're a little too clean, okay? But you notice they're right in the right voting range of amount of percentage of voting, which is good. A lot of the states are in that good range. But I want you to think about this x-axis in an interesting way. Let's say you have a clean, beautiful, pure glass of water. That would be like a clean voter rolls over here. You want to drink a lot of that yummy water, right? So you want a good turnout with good, clean rolls. That's what we want. A lot of good turnout, clean voter rolls. What you don't want is for a dirtier and dirtier and dirtier glass of water, drinking more and more and more and more, because you're drinking more and more dirt. You're getting more and more fraud. So the worst situation is to be way over here and really high, because that means you have a lot of fraud in your election. And you're right up here. You're right among some of the worst in the country. 96% of your voting eligible people are in the rolls, and 72% of them are voting, of your eligible people. And you're so patriotic here. You're way more patriotic than Missouri, Kansas, and Indiana. You're like 15% more patriotic. You vote so much more consistently than those other states. That to me is very suspicious. That's a problem. And the solution is you need to take back local control. And we could talk about this for hours, but I call it the 7 steps, and that's the next thing. Is I sit down with your team, a bunch of people volunteer to say, hey, we want to get involved, and I train you how to form your war council and how to gather your data. Now, you already have those teams here. If you want to help them, talk to Teresa. You're in Clackamas or Washington? Clackamas. So talk to Teresa if you want to help the team, because we need bodies. We're about to fight a war. We need generals and lieutenants and colonels and privates, and we need tank drivers and infrastructure and et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know of any money anybody's spending, except I guess you guys are paying for this building. But it's not an expensive thing. We're fighting. So the idea is you get connected. That's what we're doing now. Because you avail yourself of all the wisdom we've learned around the country. You get organized, that's your form your war council. You make a plan that fits your local community and our state, implement that plan, and you're basically building a movement. And this is it in very short. And then nothing goes public that hasn't been reviewed, peer reviewed. It's like when some people get excited. Dr. Frank, I found a dead voter. I told the media about it. Oh, yeah. And then the next day the dead guy shows up. It's a bad idea. So we peer review each other before anything goes public, and that leads to local empowerment. So that's a long talk. Okay, this is worth it, and then I'll stop. So I was in northern Wisconsin, and they were. I finished like this. I was finishing up. And we were cleaning up, and this lovely couple comes up to the center. She says, Dr. Frank, may we pray for you? I said, well, sure. I love it when people pray for me. So she puts her hand on my shoulder, and husband puts his hand on my shoulder, and they started praying for me. And they're Pentecostals. So they really pray loud. She started getting louder and louder and louder, and it's in this tavern, and so everybody gets quiet and everybody starts listening. And then people started coming up. It was like an invitation in church. It's like an altar call. Everybody's coming down and everybody's laying hands on me. It was awesome. It was everybody praying. It was awesome. I loved every second of it. And she was really worked up. And thank you, Lord, for giving us Dr. Frank. And then he's fighting against the evil, corrupted government of Goliath. And Lord, and the evil corruption of election fraud. And Lord, we just thank you for giving him such a big slingshot to fight Goliath with. And Lord, we just pray that you'll give him really big stones. So everybody wants to laugh, but nobody will laugh because we're really praying. It's a real prayer, right? But everybody's a little loose because we've been in a tavern for 3 hours, right? But we're all stopping, we're stifling that. She finishes up the prayer, in Jesus' name, amen. And she ends, and she opens her eyes, and everybody's got goofy looks on our face because we're trying to not laugh. She looks at me confused. I said, you just asked God to give me really big stones. She's like, oh! She turns red as your shirt, and it was hilarious. Everybody had a great laugh. But it made me think about this in a whole new way. Because when David went to the battlefield that day, he didn't go there to fight Goliath. He went there to visit his brothers. He went there to bring lunch, take news back to Dad. And he shows up at the battlefield, and there's this guy insulting their country, insulting their God. And he went to his brothers, and he said, why are you allowing this guy to insult our God and insult our country? Get out there and take care of business. And what the brothers said, do you remember? They said, you're a shepherd. Go back to the sheep. Whoa. That's exactly what's happening to you today. Everybody's saying, you're just a nobody. Let the Secretary of State tell you what to do. Let the government tell you what to do. But David didn't listen. David went out there and he stood in front of Goliath, and I love what he said. He didn't say, I'm going to whoop your butt. He said, today God is going to deliver you into my hands. The battle is the Lord's. And remember what I said at the beginning, we're in a spiritual battle as well as a political battle. And this is a spiritual battle, and God is going to stand with us if we'll stand on the side of truth and righteousness. So anyway, he threw the stone at Goliath. Goliath goes down, and then David cut his head off with the sword. Then the Bible says that the children of Israel rose up and chased the Philistines out of the land. And what did it take? It took one shepherd boy to stand up, trusting God. And that's why I want you to stand up and trust God and engage this battle. And the whole nation will rise up and chase the Philistines out of the land. That's what we need. And I know it's scary because the government is big and scary. It's big and scary. So this is the time in your life when you need to find your stones. You need to find your stones. You need to find your stones. So my promise to you is if you'll start a team, and you've already started a team, we'll coach you. We'll bring you all the resources. We'll help you out, and that's it. And so I'll take your questions. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Is that case over with, the lawsuit?
Yeah, last Friday. In fact, I was supposed to testify that morning, and the prosecution objected, and so I didn't get to testify, so Mike's going to appeal. But yeah, so what happened was in Dominion, Eric Coomer was suing Mike Lindell for defamation, and then that case was ruled, I think it's a week ago Friday. My Pillow was completely exonerated, which made Mike really happy, because to him, My Pillow, I've walked the floors with him. About a third of those people, you can tell, have had a rough prior life. He's very sympathetic to former drug addicts and whatnot, and he set up the Lindell Recovery Network. He gives these people jobs. To him, it's like his family, and it's an employee-owned company. So to him, he was very upset that they were suing My Pillow. He didn't care about himself. He cared about this. So they were completely exonerated. So that's one thing good in the trial. Then he was required to pay $400,000 in defamation damages to Eric Coomer. And then Frank Speech, which was the network he had put together where he was putting all this on, is required to pay $1.2 million to. But it's interesting because Mike doesn't own Frank Speech anymore. Yeah, Joe Altman owns it now. And so Joe Altman is stuck with that bill, I think, especially because Joe Altman is the one that got Mike started talking about Eric Coomer. He's the instigator, if you want to, they called him that in the trial. So that's the disposition of that. So I asked Mike, are you going to appeal? What are you going to do? You know, it's tempting, just give him $400,000, walk away. He says, no way, I'm appealing because I want to go back to court. The reason he wanted to be sued in the first place is to get the evidence into court. And so he wants to, that's what's going on. So Mike's in good spirits because of that, but he's broke. So help him out if you want. Go to the Lindell Offense Fund, donate money, or buy pillows.
That's right. Everything.
If you're going to go to My Pillow, let me show you what to do, and you'll see, and I'll explain why. When you go to My Pillow, you need to use my promo code, and I'll tell you why. So it's the Dr. Frank promo code, DRFRNK, because when you use a promo code, whoever's promo code gets 25% of the commission. But I've set it up that all of my commissions automatically are donated to the Lindell Offense Fund. So it's good that you're doing that, but let's say you're using the War Room code. Well, 25% is going to War Room. If you're using the Seth code, 25. So if you're trying to help Mike, use this code. And I have another ulterior motive, because I'm always on the road, and Mike always knows where I am this way. He doesn't own a computer. He runs his business with the cell phone promo codes. And he looks at it, oh, Dr. Frank's in Oregon today. And so he'll send me a little text, and it's a little game with us. So I have an ulterior motive for that. But still, he gets the money. I promise I don't get a cent of that.
So if the voting machine people gets proved, they have totally screwed up the election stuff, can Mike come and sue and get all that money back again?
Well, his question is if we can show that the machines are cheating the elections, can Mike appeal? That lawsuit wasn't about the machines. That was about defamation claims against Eric Coomer. It's sort of like the Fox lawsuit. Everybody says, well, the lawsuit proves that the machines were all good. That was a defamation lawsuit of Dominion against Fox News because Tucker Carlson was saying something different on air than what he was saying in private. What Tucker Carlson really believes is what he writes in his email messages to his colleagues, and what he says in the stage in front of the camera didn't match. And so they had him. They had him with evidence, and he thinks Sidney Powell's a wackadoodle. He thinks Mike Lindell's a wackadoodle. He's not on our side. In fact, I was supposed to be on Tucker Carlson's program the Thursday night before the big, I saw your hand, before the big day when I was talking to the 21,000, and the last minute they canceled it. They're afraid of getting sued. They don't believe, Fox News doesn't think there's election fraud. They think it's the safest election in history. So they're clueless, and they're looking out for their own. Long answer to your question. Yes, dear.
Dr. Frank, you had a nice, wonderful slide about Washington County data, and I thought you said you worked recently on the Clackamas County data, and I wondered if you had a slide to show us of our Clackamas County data.
The churn. Okay, so let's see here. I finished it, yes. In fact, I finished 5 minutes before my meeting this afternoon. So you should be able to see my screen now. I think it's this one here. Let's see, which one is it? Let's get the summary. I hope this is it. It's a big file, so it takes a minute to load. Let's see if this is the right file. Because what I do is I have in this file every copy of the voter rolls, who was added, who was removed, who was added, who was removed, in between each one. And then there's a summary of that on a summary page, and it's taking a while to load.
Take another question.
Okay, good idea. Yes, dear.
Okay, so my question is, because I see that you're passionate about Oregon, and
I am.
You're saying that we are in a perfect time right now.
Yes.
Strike while the iron's hot, right? And so Clackamas County, on one hand, is like main focus for some big elections. However, we don't have a sheriff that would likely work with us.
I agree.
So could we have you help a county that might be more likely to do what you're saying in Oregon and start there?
As a matter of fact, that's exactly what I've been doing for 2 years.
Oh, which county?
I'm not going to say.
Okay.
She wants me to say which counties those are in.
I'm glad to hear that, though, because I'm like, we can't.
You don't tell the enemy where you're going to attack.
Okay, yes, I agree.
But we have 3 counties already where we already have the fraud, we have the sheriff and the county commissioners and the party on board,
Awesome.
Which is crazy. I loaded the wrong file. Sorry, hold on. Let's see. I'm working on it. Let's see.
Can you go into the files of the Excel and open them there?
I'm a computer guy. It's just they're big files. Anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to post it all. And so you just want to get a picture of it, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. It's just a big file. And what I'll do, and when it's available, yes, sir. Steve Jonkus, he's the attorney in Tim Sipple's case. Yeah.
You showed us a number of ways how we have phantom voters.
Yeah, lots of ways.
But then you also showed us totals across the country for votes.
Yeah.
That includes those phantom voters.
Correct.
So, the difference between Democrat turnout votes in 2020 and 2024 is 10 million, but a huge portion of that, if not more than that, were phantom.
We agree.
So how do you, and you were showing us trends, bad trends.
Yes.
Over time, wouldn't those be affected by how many phantom voters there are?
Heck yeah. And that's how they're affecting the trends. He's saying.
Well, necessarily, the messages may not be, the conclusions may not be correct based on those trends because the phantom voters,
Right.
attacking the phantom voters out would be important.
Yeah. The trends are the trends. The numbers are the numbers, and they're ugly. I think what you're saying is if we could clean the phantom voters out of there, we might be able to reverse the trends. Yeah. But you can't clean the phantom voters out of there because you're not in control of your rolls. The state is what's enabling that to happen. So I'm telling you, stop letting the state control your rolls. Take back local control of your rolls and run your own election. And this is your opportunity, because it's about to be proven in court that your voter roll system is out of compliance with federal and state law. This is your great moment for the county to say, we're not going to comply because we don't have to, because it's been proven. Yeah, let him finish, then back.
But is there any way to numerically estimate the number of phantom voters and subtract them out?
Oh, he wants to know if I can predict how many phantom voters. Oh, yeah. I've done that all over the place. Oh, yeah. In fact, that's where my algorithms come in, because I'm able to figure out where to look for the fraud, because I find those anomalies and I know what the phantom voters are. Remember, like in Pennsylvania, I told you I had 1,600 addresses, and I could show you how many were, I'll move this over so you can read a little more. I just did this today. Sorry, I'll try to make it so you can see it all. Yep, 4-year span of time. So while you're taking a picture of that, and you notice I've got tabs down here. I've got the removed, added, removed, added. I can tell you everything about your, for the last 5 years. Let me finish this for a second. So yes, I can predict it, and we can take you to the doors and eliminate them, and I could calculate new trends based upon that. And I did that in Pennsylvania, big time in the early days. What I learned is that I can do all this great math. I can show you all the evidence, and a guy like you looks at that and goes, well, yeah, let's do the right thing. But we never get anywhere that way. It's crazy. I was in Kansas. I testified before the legislature there. At their request, I did an analysis of their voter rolls, Kansas, at their request. I presented my 35-minute testimony to the Kansas State Legislature, and I showed all the problems in their elections, and then they had an hour to, public discussion where they questioned me, right? And I'm standing in the microphone. And while that's happening, a young lady there, it was her first term on the legislature. Her name was Tatum Lee. She stood up. She says, hey, everybody, I'm new on this committee. I'm a first-year legislator. And so I did a little research before I came today, and I discovered that our state had already requested the analysis that we asked Dr. Frank to do of our own legislature research department. And I have the report here from 2018, and I have the report here from 2020. And she says, if you look at the 2018 report by our own department, it lists all these problems that we have in our elections, and there was already a bunch of fraud happening in 2018. She says, but everybody look at this 2020 report. And there was a clerk passing them out to everybody. And she held up and she says, look on page 7, there's a list of bullet points here. She says, this is word for word, just what Dr. Frank told us in these bullet points. And it's like the courtroom, there's like 100 people, and they burst out in cheers, woo, woo, and the guy's like, order, 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 And what am I thinking? I'm thinking, dude, I own Kansas, okay? I own Kansas because I came in from the outside, I did my own analyses, and I found everything that their own internal, with all their internal access found. I found everything they found. So I'm thinking, dude, we won. So that night, we're having a fun time. We're all at Applebee's, and I pull out my phone and call Mike Lindell. Hey, Mike, guess what happened today? Whoa. And I hold the phone up, and everybody's like, woo, woo, woo. And Mike's like, looking good. I knew you would. No, we're all having a good, fun night together, right? But while we were doing that, the legislature met in private session that night. And the next morning, the legislature met and redistricted the state of Kansas and eliminated her district. The very next morning. That's Kansas. That's red Kansas. And I could go on for hours like this. I know I'm going to get the hook. I could go on for hours like this. And what I'm basically telling you is there isn't one good legislature in this country that represents the people. They've all swung hard, and they like having central control, and they're not going to fix it. And anybody who questions the integrity of the elections, they take out. I can tell you person after person after person around the country. I'm become friends with these legislators. They're great people. They're fighting for election integrity. Anybody who fights for election integrity, the legislature removes. It's amazing. And they do it in the primaries. Thank you. Yeah.